On March 16th, 2019, so depending on when you're watching this, possibly 3 years ago to the day, the UFC touched down in London, England at the O2 Arena for UFC Fight Night Till versus Masvidal. It was a rousing night of fights and largely went well for the hometown fans right up until the main event, where, of course, Masvidal started his amazing star turn of 2019 by knocking Till out and then uh, landing the fabled three-piece in a soda on co-main event winner Leon Edwards backstage. That was the last time the UFC was in the UK. It's been a long time, an unaccustomed long time. The UFC went to the UK 3 times in 2016, twice each in 2017 and 2018, and had gone the one time in 2019. And then, of course, COVID happened. The fight night Woodley versus Edwards, scheduled for March 21st, 2020, was actually the first card the UFC had to cancel due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Since then, they tried to go back a couple times. They tried to go back or had planned to go back in September of last year. That was UFC Fight Night Brunson versus Till. That ended up getting moved to the Apex. It ended up being UFC Vegas 36 or 37, something like that. But just this Las Vegas card weirdly stacked with UK fighters. Now, finally, they do make it back. I imagine it will be a fond homecoming for the UFC, which has always really, really enjoyed passionate crowds and generally very good cards in the UK. This is my long way around to saying welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 204, Volkov versus Aspinall. And boy, does it feel good for me not to have to tell you that this is UFC Vegas 51 or whatever it would be. This is UFC London. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing? How does it feel to be back in England, at least in spirit, if not in body?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter where they are, but I love the live crowd. I mean, say what you want, the live crowd brings excitement to it. Being that England's always been a great crowd, European crowd's always good. I mean, we saw Bellator over there recently, and there was like some of the best crowds in history. This is an even better card that Bellator was putting on. Some really exciting fighters, really good matchmaking. That's what I like. It's for a fight night. This is a stacked fight night, and you could have two or three different fights on this card headline. This card, so that's what I love about this.
Well, and I like that you point out that it's a well put together card. You remember because you mentioned to me a few shows ago when the UFC had their first show back with a full house. That was, I think, at ViStar Veterans in Florida, and the first fight out of the gate was Ariane Carnelosi, and the crowd was just going bananas for a couple of basically unproven, lower level at the time women fighters, but just was so happy to have fights back in front of them that it was kind of this joyous moment. The UFC is really doing its best to make sure that that happens here. Looking at this card, at least as it's currently set up, the first 8 fights feature a UK fighter against a non-UK fighter, and the first 6 of them, the UK fighter is the favorite. I have the feeling that this, but not in ridiculous squash matches for the most part.
Sure.
But just ones where by the time we get to the main card or, most of the way through the prelims, that crowd should be at a fever pitch. Yeah. It's always a great crowd, but it's a different kind of crowd when you're in the UK or Ireland. You're going to hear like the chanting and the singing. It has part fight crowd, part football match kind of thing to it where that culture bleeds over.
Look at you, man. So accustomed to the European that you said football match, not soccer game.
I stopped myself and made myself say, good. Yeah, because not like American football, because American football, a couple of these hometown guys loses, you're going to see like cups of beer thrown on the field and, people just leaving, Yeah. we suck, but you said something else.
Hold on. Go for it. I want to address this. I want to apologize to our listeners who they kind of get a set schedule. This is coming out one day later than we normally do. That was 100% on me. I had to cancel a couple of times. So Ben was gracious enough to move it back to this week, this point. We apologize if you like to start off your Monday watching the show instead of
we're recording this Monday night, and it'll go live as soon as I finish putting it together once we're done talking here. But if there were ever a card that it was a good idea to delay on, this might have been it, because on top of obviously having, I think, something like Brits in 12 of the 13 fights, there are a lot of Russian fighters on here. And I thought it was worth waiting to see until people like Alexander Volkov, Sergei Pavlovich actually got off the plane and hit the ground in the UK. Just some UK promotions like BAMA, British Association of Mixed Martial Arts, weeks ago pulled all the Russian fighters off of their upcoming cards. And it wasn't as a political statement against those fighters. It was just bowing to the reality that there might be travel restrictions by the time these fights scheduled for March, April, May came along. So they preemptively pulled the Russian fighters off their cards. The UFC, of course, isn't going to do that. Like, if there's one truism in this universe, is that you can't tell Dana White what he can and can't do until you do. So it would have taken the beginning of this week for things to start falling apart. But nope, the UFC's like, we're pushing on with this card. And from what it looks like on Monday evening, it's going to work out. Good for the fans.
Yeah, I hope it does.
You mentioned something else before we started recording, that these fight night cards that they put on in the UK are traditionally very strong. They're oftentimes just they're a pay-per-view worthy card without the title fight main event. And I think this one certainly qualifies. If there were any title fight atop this card and Volkov Aspinall was your co-main event, you'd be like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. What I like about this is we have, for a fight night, we have many ranked fighters on this card. We have fights that matters in the rankings. I mean, I think of Arnold Allen versus Dan Hooker. That's a great matchup at featherweight. Obviously, the main event, like a guy like Paul Craig, who's been constantly winning. He's got tough tests, and Nikita Krylov. We got guys returning, Gunnar Nelson and Sergei Pavlovich. They're both guys I forgot about these guys. Mm-hmm. But they were both doing really well at one point in their careers. And I know obviously Gunnar Nelson has lost a couple, but he's also really good people. We have a kind of a budding superstar in Paddy Pimblett. He whether you like him or hate him, like, he draws interest, and there's a lot of good prospects like Ilia Topuria and
dude, Jack Shore's on the prelims.
Jack Shore versus Timur Valiev, which is an incredible fight. Yeah, I love this card. This card's loaded.
Yeah, this card is loaded, and we've dropped some of these names here, but they have stacked this card with the best of what the UK has to offer, at least at like the UFC level. Whoever you think the best UK prospect is right now, they're probably on this card. If you think it's Pimblett, if you think it's Arnold Allen, Jack Shore, if you are a believer that Cory McKenna is the future and she has all the time in the world, they're all on this card.
Another good one we forgot about. Yeah.
And they're all in sensible matchups. This is a fun card. I am jazzed to start breaking it down. Unless you've got anything else, you ready to get started?
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. First out of the gate at UFC London is a bantamweight matchup between Nathaniel Wood and Vince Morales. Wood, the 28-year-old Englishman, is 17-5 overall. He is 4-2 since joining the UFC as a former Cage Warriors bantamweight champ. By the way, there are 6 former Cage Warriors champs on this card, I think. So that's how UK fresh this is. But he has been gone for a while. He last fought in October of 2020. That was at UFC 254, where he lost a unanimous decision to Casey Kenny. Since then, he was meant to come back at that wannabe London card last September, the one that ended up being Vegas 36. He ended up pulling out with a broken hand, so it has been about a year and a half since we've seen him. He is going to step in against late notice replacement Vince Morales. Morales enters his card on a week or week and a half notice, as Ludovic Shalinian pulled out, as he is Ukrainian. He's staying in Ukraine to be with his family. No word on whether he'll be joining the armed forces like so many other Ukrainian mixed martial artists and boxers have, but he's definitely not fighting in England this weekend. Morales steps in, and he is 11-5 overall, 31-year-old out of Idaho by way of Las Vegas. He is 3-3 in the UFC. He was a competitor on the second season of Dana White's Contender Series, but he did lose. He lost to Domingo Pilarte there, went back and won a fight in Bellator, then got signed to the UFC. Since then, again, 3-3. He is on a 2-fight winning streak. He beat Draco Rodriguez by unanimous decision last August and knocked out Louis Smolka in just 2 minutes at UFC on ESPN, fought versus Aldo in December. Wood is a comfortable favorite here. He's minus 260. Morales plus 210 as the underdog. But it's worth noting that Wood was an even bigger favorite over Shalinian going into this fight. So it's another case of the UFC finding a short notice opponent that actually is at least perceived to be a more of a challenge for the fighter who's standing and waiting. We'll see how that works out. Keith, I'd almost forgotten about Nathaniel Wood. Had you? And tell me how you think this fight goes.
Yeah, that's actually like my trifecta of guys I forgot. It was Gunnar Nelson, Sergei Pavlovich, and Nathaniel Wood. And Nathaniel Wood at one time had a lot of buzz coming into the UFC. Now he's taking on Morales, who I wonder what the line would have been if Morales didn't take the fight on short notice, because he's a pretty talented guy. This is a pretty fun. It should be a fun matchup. So Wood, long, he's been out for a while, as you mentioned. Long, lengthy fighter, very poised, very calm on the feet. Works a long jab. I like that he likes to lead with his like powerful right hand, so he'll throw his like straight right as a lead punch. Avoid shots with a very boxing style with like shoulder rolls. He likes teep kicks up the middle. He mixes kicks and punches together well. I would say he's an underrated grappler. Nice takedowns, both from inside trips or just driving through the hips and entries. Slick BJJ game. He does have a submission game. Pretty well-rounded guy. Move over to Morales. Morales is 31 years old, so he's in his prime years. On the feet, pressure striker, high volume, throws accurate shots. He's pretty elusive to avoid shots. He likes to like slip and rip style. I would say he has plus power, and he has a killer instinct. If he sees his opponent's hurt, he will swarm and get the finish. Mixes takedowns in well, does well to drive through his hips. But I would say he's a weak defensive wrestler, though. He has 2 submission wins on his record, but he also, I think he has 5 losses. 2 of them have come by way of submission. So as a prediction, my notes, they're very similar, like things I was saying about each of them. I like both guys, I really do. I'm going to take Wood, especially being that he had the full camp instead of Morales. I think Wood is also more technically sound on the feet. I think Morales might have the power advantage, but if Wood gets in trouble, I like that he can go to his grappling. I think he can win the grappling battle, especially just like a straight wrestling match. Add that it's in his home country, as you mentioned on the lead up, that the crowd's going to be rocking for him. I'm going to say Wood wins by decision.
Yeah, I like that breakdown. One cool thing about Morales is he actually called out Wood after he knocked out Smolka back in December. Then, obviously he didn't get it. They booked a different fight for Wood. And as soon as Shalinian dropped off, Morales is literally like, well, what kind of, what would I be if I'm not man enough to step up now when this is what I asked for? So he called for it and he got it. But I'm with you. I'm leaning Wood here. It's an interesting thing about Wood, and I feel this way about a lot of fighters who come from the UK, and maybe it's just a UK culture thing and the way the fighters present themselves. But the ultimate example of this is Brad Pickett. It's a guy who presents as like this, I'm this tough brawler, I'm just coming to slug. But then once they get to the UFC, actually their best weapons are their wrestling and their grappling somehow.
Isn't he a Pickett guy too? Isn't he trained by Pickett? Wood? I think he is. Is he a Pickett student of Pickett?
That would make perfect sense if that's the case, because
I'm like
there you go. It's the secret Brad One Punch Pickett playbook, where you call yourself One Punch and you walk out, looking like from Snatch, but then secretly, I just want to take you down and take your back and choke you out. And I agree that that's probably going to be the difference here. I think the striking is probably going to be very even. Morales does have an advantage in demonstrated power, but it's not one punch power, no pun intended, to the point where if he stings Wood with something Wood doesn't like, I think he does have that safety valve to take it down. And while I think it would be competitive on the ground as well, I think Wood is going to be a little bigger and stronger down there and have the advantage. So give me Wood by decision as well. But this should be a real fun fight. And again, if it turns out like we think it does, the crowd will be amped.
Yeah, and I just think about Pickett is his his coach, so that's perfect.
How perfect! Yeah.
Yep. And shout out to Morales, man. If he backs up his word, takes a fight at short notice win, that's some pretty gangster shit too. So
yeah, completely. And it was a respectful call out. He was just like, he needs a fight. The UFC's going to London. I'd love to be the guy. But yeah, he ended up getting it. He got what he wished for. Man. Next up, we got Cory McKenna versus Elise Reed. You ready for this one? By the way, to those watching, I am leaving the recording going here. I'm giving myself timestamps to when to put the next image up.
Oh, we're not breaking?
No, we're not breaking. We'll break if we say something really inappropriate, like we might. Like if you see a break, it's probably because we said something that would get us fired. Next up at UFC London, UFC Fight Night 204 is a women's strawweight matchup between Cory McKenna and Elise Reed. McKenna, the 22-year-old from Essex, England, is 6-1 overall. She is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of the 2020 season of Dana White's Contender Series. Her debut was all the way back in November of 2020. That was UFC Fight Night Felder versus Dos Anjos, where she beat Kay Hansen by unanimous decision. She'll be taking on Reed. Reed, the 29-year-old New Jersey native, is 4-1 overall. She is 0-1 in the UFC. She joined up last summer, debuted against Sijara Eubanks, who, miracle of miracles, made the flyweight limit for once and pounded Reed out in pretty short order. That was a first-round TKO via ground and pound. Reed will now be dropping back down to her accustomed strawweight. And nonetheless, she is a bit of an underdog here. It's McKenna minus 235, Reed plus 190 or so. This is an interesting one to me, Keith, because one, you talk a lot about when you have a very young fighter and they have a significant amount of time off, there's always the possibility that they're going to make huge advances in their skills. When you've only been fighting for 3 years, if you have a whole year off, that's a third of the entire time you've been doing this to continue developing. That's much more significant than, some 38-year-old that takes a year off. She was supposed to fight last August. She was supposed to fight Emily Whitmire, and she pulled out due to, it was unspecified health issues, but it was, I think, at the beginning of fight week. It just felt like it might have been weight cut related, but that's totally conjecture on my part. So I'm curious, one, to see if she makes weight without incident, and then to see what sort of incremental improvements she's made in her skills. With Reed, I'm more interested to see what she looks like back down at 115. Because the thing is, this is only her 6th professional fight, but really she didn't look that bad on the come up. She beat Jasmine Yasuda-Vicious, who's now in the UFC and won her debut and is looking great. She beat Jillian DeCourcy, who, DeCourcy is tiny, but a good fighter, and she beat both of them. I'm inclined to give her a pass against Sijara Eubanks. She's a strawweight moving up to flyweight, meeting Sijara Eubanks, who rarely makes flyweight, and when she does, she's just an absolute brute. Of course, she got flung down to the ground and Donkey Kong.
Reed just be an atomweight.
Who did?
I think Reed's first fight was atomweight.
That wouldn't surprise, because Jillian DeCourcy is usually an atomweight.
Yeah, when she fought the porn star,
Rebecca Brugman.
Yeah, I was there in attendance.
I said that too quickly, didn't I? I shouldn't have had that name quite so ready on the tip of my tongue.
It would have been better if you said her porn name. Orient Star. I said that too quickly.
And away we go, folks. Welcome to the Uncut Shirt Hog Radio Network.
I was there in attendance. Talking about
for the fight.
Talking about the Reed fight, not.
Oh, for the fight, not the porn.
Not for the porn.
Oh, okay. But anyway, Reed in the Eubanks fight, my thought instantly was, okay, this is not going her way, but I would like to see her at strawweight again. Who do you think wins this one?
Sorry, I had to recover after the porn jokes. Yeah, see, to me, this is a really good prospect versus a. I agree with you saying about Reed. Like, I see her as a UFC talent, but I see her as a lower level UFC talent. Like, I don't think she I think she deserves to be here. So I mean, without giving my breakdown of the fighters, I think people know who I'm picking. I like McKenna. I mean, she's 22 years old, as you mentioned, at the age where you can just continue to improve. She's not a great athlete, but she's super strong and she's just like a brute. Like, she's just gonna like big sister people. Like, just
Hmm.
I like that she can fight at both stances. She does really well to dart in and out of range and then get out before getting attacked. Similar to what we just saw Miranda Maverick do against Sabina Mazo. Chopping leg kicks. She'll throw a high kick, which she'll surprise you with that. She's kind of like a Derek Lewis surprising head kick, where you look at her and her style, you don't think she can get it up there, but she's developing that. She's a bit of a grind against the cage. That's where she really uses that strength. She does well to dive down on her opponent's hips and get the takedown. She also likes when she's driving through, she'll do like that back trip, or when she's pressed against the cage, she'll like. Uh, I always think of Hoist Gracie against uh, Gerard Gardeau, where you kind of get that like leg behind it and just pull it out. Uh, she will shoot sometimes without any setup, which I don't like. And I have seen her get taken down on the regional scene on her way up against lesser opponents. So I don't like that. But those are things that she needs to clean up. And if she cleans that up, she's gonna be a really good force. Reed, as you mentioned, like we talked about being undersized at 150. I mean, at 125, she might be undersized at 115 too. I'm not really sure about that. But she's a pressure striker, high volume. She's a boxer. Uh, I'd say boxing's pretty good, busy jab, but she tends to, I said this last time, she tends to lack some power because she pulls her punches a little bit. Um, that's because she keeps her chin high in the air. Due to her boxing style, she's open to leg kicks. She's decent in the clinch, not much of an offensive wrestler, but she's on top. She's got some like brutal ground and pound. But we saw her get beat up on the ground by Sajara Eubanks. She also like Hillary Rose was a fight, and Hillary Rose also a lot bigger than her too. But, like Hillary Rose almost submitted her a couple of times, including had her in an inverted triangle. That's not a good look. So I like McKenna. I just think she's better everywhere. I expect her to land the shots on the feet before closing distance and get in takedown. Once on top, she just unleashes that hard ground and pound. I actually think she'll work to a better position. Eventually, even get a mount or something, and get a TKO by ground and pound. So give me McKenna by second round TKO.
I'm feeling very much the same way here. In fact, you kind of said it in the first sentence. This is a good prospect against a very good prospect, someone who probably belongs in the UFC versus someone who in a couple of years might have top 10 upside. That pretty much sums it up for me. And McKenna's, I mean, for someone who, I say this as neutrally and respectfully as possible, comes across very adorable. She has a mean, grimy streak in her fight style. And because of that, I'm with you. I think she's going to find a finish somehow here. Just to keep it interesting, I'm going to say she finds a sub in the second round, but probably ends up being one of those choose your poison situations where she's in mount and she's dropping hammers, and Reed can either turtle up or give her back. So give me McKenna by second round submission, but it'll be a nice comeback after well over a year off. We now head to the featherweight division for a matchup between Mike Grundy and Makwan Amirkhani. Grundy, the 35-year-old Manchester native, is 12-3 overall. Oh, sorry. Yeah, he's 12-3 overall. He's 1-2 in the UFC. Won his debut over Nad Narimani all the way back in 2019. Since then, he has lost back-to-back fights. A unanimous decision against Movsar Evloev back in July of 2020 in a very fun scramble fest. Then a split decision loss to Lando Venata last May at UFC 262 here in Houston. He will try to get things turned around against Amirkhani, the 33-year-old who goes by Mr. Finland but does train out of SBG Ireland, is 16-7 overall. He is 6-5 in the UFC. And while he debuted with a certain amount of promise and obvious star potential, that has been blunted just by his misfortunes in the cage. He is on a 3-fight losing streak. Those three coming against Edson Barboza, Camwella Kirk, and most recently, Laron Murphy, who knocked him out last October in the second round at UFC 267. Grundy is a slight favorite here. He's minus 130. Amirkhani plus 115 as the underdog. I mean, I'll tell you that I see a pretty obvious, it pretty obviously hinges on one thing to me. Amirkhani, even at his best, when he was on the way up and he won, 3 of his first 4 or 4 of his first 5 or something in the UFC and was looking like a future star, especially coming out of SBG Ireland. He was a grappler without great wrestling, either offensive or defensive. So his best chance to win fights was usually submission, but he had a tough time getting the fight to the canvas on his terms. And for a guy like that, and that certainly has not gotten better as he's had problems, Grundy is poison. I think Grundy's wrestling credentials are probably a little overstated. He wrestled for the Commonwealth on the world stage, but never placed. His best place was bronze in the Commonwealth Games. So he was the 3rd best wrestler in the United Kingdom that year. I mean, it's good, but it's not. Don't call him an Olympic hopeful is what Keith and I would say after last week.
It's not Terrence McKinney level.
But he is a good offensive wrestler. He's a powerful guy that shoots. He shoots single and double legs from the outside. He wrestles like an American college wrestler for the most part, and we saw that in the Movsar Evloev fight. Evloev is a primo prospect and a fantastic wrestler and grappler, and Grundy got him down over and over again. Just Evloev was so slippery that he never could really secure it, and it turned into endless scrambles. When he shoots through Amirkhani's hips and dumps him, Amirkhani is exactly the kind of guy that is going to jump on a guillotine or just immediately give up the takedown, go to guard, and start working from the bottom. Or if he goes for a scramble, he's going to be looking for a leg or something. He's tailor-made for Mike Grundy to win rounds against. So, I'm sure you'll have a more detailed X's and O's than that to me. But when I see this fight in my head, I see Grundy probably winning all 3 rounds just by getting takedowns fairly easily, and Amirkhani just being too willing to lose rounds from his back while going for low percentage stuff. So give me Mike Grundy by decision here.
Yeah, I like a lot of things that you're saying, and I'm agreeing. I think it's going to probably be the 3rd fight in a row that we agree. So Makwan Amirkhani, he's a southpaw. He keeps his hands too low for my liking, but he does use it offensively. He likes to throw the up jab. I did like his step-in knees that he hit Edson Barboza. But I'm really, for a guy who's probably a one-dimensional fighter, for being honest, I'm really worried about his chin on the feet. He was dropped twice by Barboza. He was dropped twice by Jason Knight. He was dropped by Shane Burgos. Laron Murphy knocked him out in his last fight. So you can't like that. Now, he's going to want to wrestle. I agree that he's not as good of a wrestler, technically, as you say, but he makes up for it by just shooting. Like, he'll shoot 1,000 times. He won't give up on it. I agree that I've seen entries up. I think it's entries a little better than you give it credit for, but he'll shoot without a setup, and then go back to his last fight. Murphy made him pay for that. Murphy timed him perfectly with a knee when he didn't set up a shot. But if he gets on top, he's probably a better, like you mentioned, he's a better grappler than he is a wrestler. He's got good top control, good ground and pound. He has a submission threat. He's got 11 career submissions. Deals that anaconda choke. But all that grappling gets him tired. We've seen him fade in fight. Now move over to Grundy. I think your breakdown was really good. One thing I'd add to that is he's a really good athlete. He's pretty light on the feet. He uses a lot of up and down feints, which is perfect for a wrestler. I love that he cuts angles side to side when he's blitzing. He's never coming straight on the same line. When he gets inside, he's like your classic wrestler box. He gets inside, he wants a little power hooks. He can lunge and put himself off balance, and he's probably going to get knocked out bad sometime for that, but by a really good striker. That's not Amirkhani. He also makes a mistake of throwing a lot of single strikes, trying to end the fight with a perfectly placed blow, kind of a little Josh Emmett in that style. But you mentioned he's a very good wrestler. As you mentioned, medalist in the Commonwealth Games. We like to shit on non-American, Middle Eastern, or Russian wrestlers. But in the level of UFC, he's definitely one of the better wrestlers. Good timing on his reactionary double. He's good at like forcing his footwork, forcing his opponents to kind of chase him down and then just drop underneath when they over pursue. You mentioned he took Valiev down 6 times, which is a great accomplishment. He's also a very strong guy. If he gets in the hips, he can pick you up, slam you. Very good top pressure, and he's a guy who likes to chase. Like, he likes the head attack, so he likes Darth chokes, topside guillotines, things like that. You seem very confident in Grundy, and I'm matching you, man. I think Grundy is a terrible stylistic matchup for Amirkhani. I see him winning the wrestling battles. I see him putting Amirkhani on his back during the scrambles, and I actually see him landing some pretty heavy shots in the feet. I don't trust Amirkhani's chin anymore. I think Grundy might catch him or something. So I'm going to say Grundy gets that knockout that he's been looking for. I'm going to say Grundy wins by 3rd round TKO.
Well, there you have it. 2 pretty emphatic calls for Mike Grundy to get things back on track against Makwan Amirkhani, which would be his 4th loss in a row. Looks like we'll have some stuff to talk about on the recap on that one.
One thing I noticed, considering we don't have any breaks, we're not doing any side talk like we normally do.
Well, it's because we're excited for all these fights.
Yeah,
like we always go into like the 20-minute aside, and then I'm like, oh, that's right. It's it's because like Antonina Shevchenko is fighting next.
We can't show the listeners that we're friends. We gotta pretend like we're just business all the time.
I don't think anybody who watches the shows thinks that way. Oh, I got Muhammad Mokaev versus Cody Durden next. Sound good?
Yeah. I have no idea what the order is. Like, I've seen a whole bunch of different sites. Like, I usually try to go off the UFC website, but the Sherdog has a different order. Then ESPN has a different order. Topology has a different order. So I just know that Jack Shore's on the prelims.
Yep, Jack Shore's on the prelims.
Yeah.
We head down to the flyweight division, or so we hope. Knock on wood. I'll explain that in a minute. For the debut, the highly anticipated debut of Muhammad Mokaev against Cody Durden. Mokaev, the 21-year-old Dagestani-born, but has lived and trained in the UK for several years now. 21 years old. I don't think he's the first fighter in the UFC to be born in the 2000s, but he's one of the first 2 or 3, which makes me feel really, really damn old. Anyway, he is a perfect 6-0 with 1 no contest overall, and that's after a lengthy and I believe also undefeated amateur career. He's a super blue chip prospect. This will be his debut in the UFC. He has been fighting in Brave CF. Notably, his last 3 fights, I believe, in Brave CF were at 130 pounds. So this will be his first time dropping all the way to 126. So keep an eye out for that, obviously. And he will be meeting Durden, the 30-year-old Georgia native, fighting out of ATT Atlanta, the Lima brothers. He is 12-3-1 overall. He is a perfect 1-1-1 in the UFC. He had a draw in his debut against Chris Gutierrez, then got absolutely posterized by Jimmy Flick in his next fight. You may remember Flick hit a flying triangle on him, then retired in the cage at the age of 26 or something and swung off into the sunset, said it ain't getting any better than this. We barely knew you, Jimmy Flick. Come back. And then finally got back on track last November at UFC Fight Night, Vieira versus Tate, taking a unanimous decision over Auri Chileng. Mokaev, one of the bigger favorites on the card. He is minus 350 right now, where Durden is plus 260 as the underdog. Man, I think this is a very sensible first matchup for a guy like Muhammad Mokaev. Like, he has all the earmarks of a future just monster in this sport. He's looked fantastic on his way up against, honestly, pretty solid competition. Like, they aren't chumps that he's been beating. And I think Durden is a really appropriate first test for him. A guy who, at the very least, he's got a big, solid flyweight build. He's a generally well-rounded guy. He's much more experienced. But I think he's also tailor-made for Mokaev to look really good against. Mokaev has all the skills that you would expect from a Dagestani. Like, he's a very, very good wrestler. Everything works from his wrestling, but he's a very good striker as well. Likes to kick a lot. He'll come out with kicks to the head, kicks to the body a lot of the time. He has the unbridled kicking game of a guy who is not afraid of being taken down. There's something about that just kind of frees you up to start unloading on people. Pretty good puncher out of orthodox stance as well. Like has a nice left jab, throws a nice 1-2, and that's been improving just over his 7 fights as a pro. The thing about Durden is, in all of his fights, his opponents have had moments of offense against him. I think the first guy I said this about was Julian Erosa, where Julian Erosa has all the tools offensively, but he's an equal opportunity distributor of highlights. Like, he's perfectly willing to end up on your highlight reel as well. And that's what I see in all of Durden's fights so far. Like, the flick one is obvious, but the draw against Chris Gutierrez, that was a draw because he got a 10-8 first round, just completely mauled him on the ground. And then Gutierrez won the second and third rounds, not 10-8, but won him handily and just kind of, out wrestled him, teed off on the feet. I have the feeling that Mokaev is just going to run right through Durden here. Mokaev is going to come out. He's going to come out kicking. That's how he starts almost every fight. And when he decides to turn the switch and go for his first takedown, he's going to get Durden down, probably take his back in pretty short order and choke him out. Give me Muhammad Mokaev to have a very successful UFC debut. Give me Mokaev by first round submission here.
Yeah. So one thing about Durden, you mentioned, like, he's nonstop action. He's a fun fighter to have in the cage. He throws these big, wild haymakers, but because of that, he's got to slow down late. But he throws tons of hard leg kicks. He does check leg kicks. He's a good wrestler. The UFC broadcast says he's a 2-time Georgia high school state champion wrestler. Again, you know how I feel about high school wrestling credentials. Everybody's a state champion wrestler, it seems like.
And keep in mind when he says this, that he is a state champion wrestler, that Keith here is a Rhode Island state champ. So he knows of what he speaks. He's not just shitting on something that he has no idea about.
Yeah, well, I mean, but people are going to say Rhode Island, so seriously. So
Keith Schillen and Frank Mir are your high school wrestling champs who parlayed that into, mixed martial arts success.
No, but I mean, a regional in Georgia is probably equal. So that's what I'm assuming. He's probably a regional champion. But you know what? He's probably an Olympic hopeful. That's what he is in wrestling.
Hey, so am I. I'm an Olympic hopeful right now. I'm hoping.
I'm still hoping it happens. So he's got a good ground and pound. I am worried about his sub defense. He was going back to the Gutierrez fight. He almost was submitted by that. He has been submitted 2 out of his 3 losses. He was submitted by Jimmy Flick. Jimmy Flick's a really good grappler. I love that you said that Jimmy Flick said that doesn't get any better than beating Cody Durden and calling it a career. That's great. Mokaev, despite only being 5-0, seeming inexperienced, I looked up. He's got at least 22 amateur fights on his record. He's a very good athlete, high volume striker, fast hands. I like how he sets up his strikes with good feints, drawing out attacks. Good head movement. He has really slip and rip style. I love that he rips the body. He can be pulled into a brawl a little bit, but he's got fast hands, and that's probably why he likes to respond with combos. Strong wrestler, good entries, smothering top control. Like, that's probably the best part of his game is just like he's got that Dagestanian style to him where he gets on top and controls. Very good ground and pound. If you try to take him down, strong takedown defense. And like I said, he only has 5 pro fights, but 2 of them came by way of submission. So you got to feel good about that. And I think this fight could be really fireworks on the feet if both guys decide to brawl it out. But if it hits the ground, we could have some pretty fun scrambles. But despite having less fights, and I guess I agree with you, he's fought some pretty good competition, but probably lesser competition than Durden has. I think Mokaev is just way more polished. I think he's better everywhere. I think he wins all the wrestling exchanges. He could find a submission late, or he could Durden can gas out and he can find a finish, ground and pound or a sub. But I'm going to say Durden makes it to the scorecard. Give me Mokaev to win all 3 scorecards, 30-27.
There you go. 2 calls for Muhammad Mokaev to have a successful debut in front of a crowd that, frankly, they will claim him as their own. Like, he's a British fighter as far as they're concerned.
It's like how I claim anybody who's doing good as a New England fighter. Like,
yeah,
Alex Bayer has been training. He's like Southern New Englander.
Oh yeah,
that's it. I'm claiming him. He doesn't speak English, but he's a Southern New Englander. All he's gonna say is like, "I'm wicked good," and we got him.
Yep. Man, do you see that Eagle FC has Junior Dos Santos versus Jorgen De Castro coming up?
Dude, did I tell you what happened? I actually found out that fight, and it was one of these ones. I was doing something, and I didn't like check that it wasn't broke. I could have broke that fight myself. I'm kicking myself that I didn't I didn't break that news. But I love what Jay mentioned, that it was like the biggest drop off in competition ever for Junior Dos Santos. You go from Cyril Gahn to Jorgen De Castro.
And if he beats Jorgen De Castro, Eagle just signed Thiago Silva. Maybe we get that next, and it's the greatest contrast between the best and worst person ever to fight each other. Like, I mean, you can't find anybody who doesn't like Junior Dos Santos. No. He is just the goodest dude one of the goodest dudes in the sport.
Yeah, and I know tons of people who train with Jorgen De Castro, and they all say that guy's like the sweetest dude. Mm-hmm. I know he's like a janitor, and his school loves him at Durfee High School in Fall River. Fall River's a tough city too.
Like, I mean, I guess so. Like, you've got a UFC level janitor, just
to
make sure that people aren't like throwing, like when they throw their gum, it doesn't miss the trash can.
That's right. Not a lot of gum underneath the tables at Durfee High School.
No, but man, JDS really he's like the heavyweight Glover Teixeira. Like, just can't find anyone to say anything bad about him, like opponents and he's going to fight Thiago Silva, like the terrifying.
Yeah, he did it opposite though. Like, he won the title first. He won the title early, and then kind of been trying to get it back ever since.
Yeah. Well, that was our Eagle FC hour. You ready to talk about Molly McCann versus Luana Carolina?
You know what? It's so true. The fights that we don't want to talk about, we always have to go on a side tangent first. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's get over.
Next up on the UFC London prelims is a flyweight matchup between Molly McCann and Luana Carolina. McCann, the 31-year-old Liverpool native, is 11-4 overall. She is 4-3 since joining the UFC as the previous Cage Warriors flyweight champ. And I say the previous Cage Warriors flyweight champ, not a previous, because she's the only one. She left Cage Warriors in 2018, and she was so awesome that they decided to just retire the division, or at least have never crowned another champ. Molly McCann remains the only flyweight champ in Cage Warriors history. She'll be taking on Carolina. The 28-year-old Brazilian is 8-2 overall. She is 3-1 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series Brazil. She is on a 2-fight winning streak, those two coming over Poliana Botelho and Lupita Godinez, whom she beat last October at UFC Fight Night Lad versus Dumont. Those two wins got her back on track after her first UFC loss, which was that excruciating-looking knee bar against Ariane Lipski that kind of marked the bounce back of Ariane Lipski as any of her previous prospect shine. But nonetheless, she's on a 2-fight winning streak. That's not enough to get her any love in the eyes of the odds makers, though. She is the underdog at +110. McCann, the favorite at -130. And speaking of favorites, this arena, regardless of what has happened in the first 4 fights, is going to go absolutely bonkers when she walks out. She is an extremely beloved fighter, and how could she not be? Her nickname is Meatball Molly. It takes one jab and a stiff breeze to make her look like she's been run over by a truck. She just has that British fighter complexion that she's just beat red within the first 15 seconds of every fight. And she's one of those does more with less in terms of kind of natural athletic gifts fighters, kind of Roxanne Modafferi would be the gold standard for that, but McCann is very much of that. She's of that mold. She's also of that British fighter mold that presents as a slugger. I'm just going to brawl. I'm here to scrap, but deceptively good on the ground. It's not quite to the point of a Nathaniel Wood type where that's actually his best weapons, but deceptively capable of taking care of herself on the ground. Man, I'm going to hand this to you for your pick first because I've got thoughts about this one, but for two women that are above 500 in the UFC, like McCann is 4-3 in the UFC, Carolina is 3-1 in the UFC, I'm not super high on either. I think we've already seen McCann's ceiling, and I think we might have seen Carolina's ceiling. I'm frankly kind of surprised she's still here. I thought after the Lipski loss, she'd lose 1 or 2 more and be gone, and she's won and hung around, and I'm not exactly sure how. So
Did she beat Godinez last fight?
She beat Godinez in her last fight, and then Poliana Botelho in the fight before that.
Yeah.
The Botelho fight was a splitter. The Godinez fight, I mean, she looked twice her size. I don't know. Like, talk me off the ledge. What's good about this fight and who wins?
Molly McCann is really fun. Like, I'll say that. Like, I met her at UFC Boston when she took on Daniel Belbitsa, and like I remember doing the post-fight interviews, and I couldn't understand half the words she said, but the way she said it, like she's so like full of energy, and I was like, man, I like this. I just like a cool ass chick. Yeah, I mean, Molly McCann will make it fun. Like, she's a high volume fighter. She can attack from both stances, uses good movement. She likes to stay all the way out and then dart in and then throw high combos. She excels in the pocket. She's willing to eat a shot to land one of her own shots.
At least.
Yeah. She tends to throw too many power shots for my liking, being that she tries to end the fight with one shot. She's heavy on her lead leg, which gives her power, but also can get it kicked out. I mean, Tyler Santos destroyed her lead leg and also kept timing her with teep kicks up the middle. She can grind, though. She'll grind in the clinch. She'll stay busy in there, dirty boxing. I would say she's a good wrestler, but I think it's actually like a little overstated, her wrestling. She really struggles to stop takedowns. I mean, she gave up 7 takedowns to Laura Procopio and 5 takedowns to Leah Santos. And if you put her on her back, she really struggled to get off. Like Santos looked like a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, like a high level, looked like freaking Gordon Ryan out there or something against her. She's got good cardio though. Like, she's going to work the entire 50 minutes. She's going to be in your face. Move over to Carolina. Oh man, Carolina. Long and lengthy, outboxer. She's an experienced Muay Thai practitioner. She likes lots of range strikes, long jab, teep kicks. She has hard leg kicks. She's good in the plum, but she's the offensive initiator, because she can use her height to kind of hold and frame, hold on the back of that frame, land some good shots. She's good at blasting these inside. She's got really weak takedown defense, like really bad. Though, to her credit, her takedown defense looked so much better against Godinez. But as you just mentioned, she was way too big for Godinez. She looked like she had 30 pounds on her. And remember, that was the fight where like Godinez took the fight like right back. She was like fought. I think was it the very next card she fought? Like she fought, and then a week later she fought again. Or
it was 10 days or something. It was
record, right?
Because it was right up against Hamzat Shemayev's record, where she would have broken the record for consecutive wins if she'd won both of them, but she did break the record for consecutive appearances.
Yeah. So as far as prediction goes, this is a really tough call. Like, McCann definitely has the style to beat Carolina. Stylistically, when I think about it, I should be taking McCann. But Carolina is the better athlete. She's also more technically sound on the feet. And it comes down to whether she has improved that takedown defense. Was it because of the size of it, or did she come up with something technical? And I feel like that's the one thing that's stopping her from being a much better fighter. Well, McCann, we've seen her sailing. Like, I don't know if we've seen the sailing of Carolina. And I think Carolina could have a much higher ceiling if she can show me some grappling. So I'm rooting for that. So I say she stops some of. I think she's going to show that it wasn't just her size, man. She's going to stop some takedowns, land the cleanest shots. Give me Carolina by decision.
I like the breakdown there. This is going to be our first point of dissension this evening. And the reason I'm going to go with McCann by decision is her secret weapon is going to be the 12 or 15,000 people in the O2 arena, where I have the feeling that Carolina is going to have to really, really put her stamp on rounds to win rounds against McCann. Like, I could see this being the fight where pretty much everybody scores at 29-28 Carolina, like in the media, and then we get a splitter for McCann where like one of them is 30-27 McCann. This has that kind of thing written all over it for me. You will occasionally predict a fight to be won by split decision, you know, just as your indicator that it's going to be a close fight and the kind of fight where individual rounds are controversial. I'm going that way here. I could see Karolina like me thinking she won 2 rounds, and again, one of the judges giving McCann all 3 rounds because this crowd is just going to pop for everything she does and not really sell anything Karolina does unless she's like really close to finishing the fight. Nonetheless, I agree with you that Karolina has more upside at this point. But hey, anything that keeps Meatball Molly around the UFC for a couple more fights is a-okay with me. Next up, we have bantamweights as Jack Shore takes on Timur Valiev. Shore, the 27-year-old Welshman, is a perfect 15-0 as a professional. He is 4-0 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Cage Warriors bantamweight champ. His most recent win was last September at UFC Fight Night Brunson versus Till. Again, what should have been UFC London, but was UFC Vegas 36. There he beat Ludwig Shalinian by unanimous decision. Prior to that, he had beaten Hunter Azure, Aaron Phillips, and Noelina Hernandez in the UFC. He'll be taking on Valiev. The 32-year-old Dagestani is 18-2 with 1 no contest in his professional mixed martial arts career. He is 2-0 with 1 no contest in the UFC. That 1 no contest was him getting splattered by Trevin Jones, who stepped up on short notice. Unfortunately for Jones, it was too short notice to drink some detox tea and get the traces of marijuana out of his system, which is why that is a no contest now. There is no word as to why or whether or not that is how Timur Valiev got his nickname Lucky, but lucky it is that he doesn't have an official loss on his record. Frankly, this is the second highest level fight on the entire card to me. Like south of Volkov and Aspinall, where it's a top 10 guy. I mean, 2 top 10 guys, really. I think this is the next highest level fight on the card. I mean, you can argue that Krylov versus Craig is. What's that?
Well, Hooker and Arnold?
Well, Hooker at featherweight? Absolutely.
Okay.
Hooker's 3-3 as a featherweight. And he hasn't fought there in like 3 years. Yeah, like this is definitely higher level than that to me.
Hating on Dan Hooker.
I'm not hating on him yet. If he misses weight, all bets are off.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
But honestly, the next closest contestant to me is Krylov versus Craig, where it's probably a top 10 against probably a top 15 guy. But regardless, I mean, that's my overstated way of saying I can't believe this fight is either 6th or 3rd on this card, depending on whose bout order you believe, because this thing is monstrous. And Valiev is a moderate favorite here. Just, it's not often that you see somebody who is undefeated, who is favored to get his first defeat. But yeah, Valiev minus 175, Shore plus 140 as of Monday of fight week. However, as fight week powers along, British money is going to come in on Shore. So if you believe in Valiev, wait. That's my only betting advice. Like if you like the guy fighting the Welshman, then give the odds a minute to move. Keith, you seem to be digging in your heels a little bit against me calling this the second best fight on this card, but I know you love the fight. So talk to me about it.
Oh, yeah. No. It wasn't even like I was fighting against it. I was just kind of asked. I honestly just thought you forgot about Hooker versus Arnold. That's why I was just throwing that out there. No, man, I love this fight. I mean, I love it and hate it. I love it because these two guys are both they're top 15 talents. I mean, the winner of this one is just going to be like skyrocketing up the rankings and promising, and especially if one of them destroys the other one. You mentioned that Valley is a negative 175 favorite. Like, I'm shocked by that. Not shocked by his talent. I'm just shocked by the disrespect. Jack Shore was really good.
Jack Shore is really good. I mean, these two guys. You said you love it and you hate it. I assume you hate it just because two prospects this good are meeting, and it's early enough that there aren't immediate title implications on the line.
Yeah,
This is kind of like the Steve Mowry versus Tyrell Fortune of UFC London.
Yeah, we already had that side talk earlier. I just really like both guys. So, and Jack Shore also has he has a cult following in England. The people have tattoos of Jack Shore's on fire, which was cool when I was doing a preview of him before he was even in the UFC. Yeah, I think you want to talk me into this being the second best fight. But, I mean, if we want to just be honest, this might be the best fight of the card. So Jack Shore, he's not a great athlete. Like but nothing that does you like wowed by. But he's so intelligent. Like he knows what he's good at. He's going to get himself in that position. He stalks his foes. He works behind a busy jab. Got a good variety of strikes, both his punches and kicks to all points of the body. Uh, he loves his leg kicks. He really, as I mentioned earlier, he's a killer instinct. If he gets you hurt, he's gonna swarm you. He's a great wrestler. Uh, Fast entries. He's relentless to get takedowns. He chains takedowns together. Like he looks like a much better wrestler than his credentials say. Good body locks. Good at winning scrambles. He has a little bit of like Habib's Nurmagomedov control to him, where he'll like pick a single limb, pinch down on an elbow, grab a wrist, something to kind of control that one point, keep it pinned on the canvas, so he can position himself higher up in the body while his opponent struggles to get up. Hard ground pound, really slick back takes. He's got 8 submission wins, and he's shown he's got the cardio to go hard for all 15 minutes. Now, yes. So I move over to Valiev. Now he's the complete opposite of Shore in the fact that he's like oozes athleticism. You could see his speed in his fights. Like the Trevin Jones fight, like he was attacking Trevin Jones at all points of attack. Constant pressure, high volume, very technical striker. Uses feints to get his opponents guessing. Good variety, both his hands, his kicks. I mean, he tore up Trevin Jones with his body work. Great head movement. He has very slip and rip style. I like that he goes down to the body. Good footwork, both avoiding shots and cutting angles on his attacks. Lots of kicks, teep kicks, calf kicks. He can wrestle really good. Great entries, great chain wrestling, smothering top control. So we talked about whether we kind of had a little debate there on how good it is pure the rankings, but actual X's and O's, the fight that I'm most interested in is this fight. It's I'm giving a slight lean towards Valiev, and the reason why I'm saying I'm giving him a slight lead is he's the more technically sound fighter, but he's gonna have to fight his fight. Like he can't be pressed back by Shaw. And the reason I'm only saying a slight lean, Valiev has these explosive movements and he's more technically sound. Everything you would measure a fight by, he has it, except the thing you can't measure, and that's like this like grit and this toughness and this like intelligence that Jack Shore has. That's why I feel like this should be a much closer fight because you can't measure that stuff. And if Jack Shore could force him to kind of fight off his back foot, pressing the match towards Valiev, that'll really change the fight and he could win. But I think Valiev will land the better shots on the feet. I'm really looking forward to their scrambles. Who's going to win those scrambles? I'm going to guess that Valiev really makes sure work for those takedowns. And I'm going to say Valiev wins a really close decision. I wasn't going to go split decision, but just really close. I say unanimous, but really, really close fight.
Yeah, I love that breakdown. And I do love this fight. And while two prospects this good, always I'd love to see them not face each other until they're both in the top 10 and, at least within a couple fights of the title picture. But here, it's even early enough that if one of them wins and they both continue to pan out like it looks like they're going to, they might meet a couple years down the road and it would be a rematch that we look forward to. Kind of like, Adesanya versus Vettori. Where, yeah, they met and, it was a competitive fight, but nobody was saying, well, Vettori shouldn't get another chance at this guy or this fight doesn't matter. This could be that kind of fight. Shore is still just 27. It is crazy that a man 27 years old that wasn't yet in the UFC at the time was getting people getting tattoos of him. Like if you're 27 and getting people like to tattoo you on them and you're not a dead rock star, that's pretty damn impressive. Like you need to be like, Kurt Cobain or, you could be like, Biggie or Tupac or something, but yeah. Remarkable stuff. As far as the fight itself goes, I feel it breaking the same way you do, but I am going to lean Shore here. Just You put it perfectly. Like, he's intelligent and relentless and just fights to his best. Like, he's never going to give away a fight. The day that Jack Shore loses, whether it's this coming Saturday or it's 3 years from now in his third title defense, someone's going to have to come take it from him. Like, he's never going to give a fight away. Just preternaturally intelligent, and has been ever since he was like 23 and still in Cage Warriors. Give me Shore by decision here, and should be a real fun battle. I'm interested to see who is the fresher man in the third round, because Shore has a very good gas tank, but he's probably going to end up needing to employ a wrestle heavy approach here, whereas Valiev tends to have a pretty good gas tank as well, but employs a lot more explosive movements. I'm interested to see who has the cardio advantage if and when this goes to the third round. I'm leaning Shore, which as of right now is an upset, but we'll see how that looks in 5 days.
I almost want, even though I picked Valiev, I almost want Shore to win. I think it'd be better for the UFC if Shore won. There's a bunch of Valievs. There's a bunch of like star Russians. There's not only a lot of star, English, or no way. Shore's he's English.
Shore's Welsh, but I mean, English is his native language. Yeah,
even more. Yeah.
I should have mentioned earlier, Cory McKenna is the first Welsh woman to win a fight in the UFC. I don't remember if Shore is the first Welsh man to win one in the UFC. Like, somebody, might have gotten one before him, but he's among the first.
Are we still recording?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait for Europeans to kill me for not knowing the difference between Wales and England. Shout out to my I don't know his last name. It's Ryan. It's spelled Fortune. I think it's Fortune. I think it's how he's Fortune. Okay. I'm assuming he's from Wales. He's a great dude. He's with me with MMA Takeover. I had to ask him once the whole what's the difference between the UK and Great Britain, and I can't explain all the history to me. I didn't have a clue.
It's complicated stuff, and then there's a whole thing. Okay, what's the relationship of Dagestan and Chechnya, to Russia? Because it used to all just be, it's the Soviet Union, and now they're parts of Russia, but they're independent republics. They have their own presidents, but their troops are in the Russian army. It's complicated. It's nice that we live in the U.S. where everything's nice and simple, right?
You know what? George Washington made it so I don't know about that.
Yeah, when he chopped down that motherfucking cherry tree, he made it so that that our history in geopolitics would always be very, very simple and easy to understand.
Yeah, no, shout out to all our European listeners. We love you all, especially from the UK. So this is what we normally do. This is what we normally do between every single show. We just keep going and going. We were whatever whole thing about George Washington and shit.
But the only thing we're missing so far is a talk about a bunch of crap that happened in 2002. But I imagine that will happen when we get to the main event and I talk about how much Tom Aspinall looks like Frank Mir.
So I'll give you one. So there was a famous general. Have you heard of Nathaniel Green?
Of course.
Oh, okay, I know. He lives right down, his house is right down the road. He lives in his house was in Coventry, Rhode Island. That's where I live, Coventry.
Yeah, I mean, Nathaniel Green, the
1 mile down the road.
One of the greatest kind of unsung generals of the American Revolution. Yeah, I mean,
he was I think he was George Washington's number 2 guy.
He was for several points, and he also kind of ran other theaters of the war. I listened to a long podcast on the American Revolution just recently, so got a lot of Nathaniel Green info recently. But yeah, that guy ruled.
That's cool. Hey, we drive by his house. It's not on a main road. Just there's a main road, and then you can take one little turn. Something I drive by, point it out.
That's very cool.
Yeah. You can take tours and shit. It's cool.
Want to talk about Herbert versus Topuria?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I do.
All right. Next up on the UFC Fight Night 204 prelims is a lightweight matchup between Jai Herbert and Ilia Topuria. And man, the UFC is banking on action in this thing. This is the heaviest fight on the card so far. We're 6 fights in, and this is the heaviest fight on the card so far, and it's at lightweight. Or 7 fights in, and it's a lightweight. We're gonna have some craziness. I think, yeah. Anyway, Herbert the 33-year-old Brit who goes by the Black Country Banger. Incidentally, here's your little geographical info of the day. That nickname does not mean that he is black and country. It's not like, Derek Lewis saying, I'm black and I'm country. No, the Black Country is the part of Midlands, in the same general region as Birmingham, where Jai Herbert is from. So he is the banger from the Black Country. That's that. Okay,
okay.
black because of coal.
I'm
Not black. Not black because he's black. Because when it was named that, there weren't many black people there. Anyway, he is 11-3 overall. He is only 1-2 in the UFC since joining as a former Cage Warriors lightweight champ. He lost his first 2 fights against Francisco Trinaldo and Renato Moicano. Bounced back from those 2 with a win over Kama Worthy at UFC Fight Night Costa versus Vittori last October. He knocked him out in the first round. I don't know if it saved his job, but it certainly saved any vestige of his original shine as a prospect, because he came in on a 6-fight win streak. Again, was a Cage Warriors champ. We're talking about the same Cage Warriors division that people like Conor McGregor had been champion of, and then lost his first 2. However, if he wants to keep it going, he has a fairly tall order in the form of Ilia Topuria. Topuria, the 25-year-old Georgian-born, based out of Spain fighter, is a perfect 11-0 overall. He is a perfect 2-0 since joining the UFC. Or sorry, he's 3-0 since joining the UFC out of Brave CF back in early 2020. He has beaten Yusuf Zalal, Damon Jackson, and Ryan Hall. Those last 2, the Jackson and Hall wins, both of them first round knockouts. He moves up to 155 pounds for this one. And despite that, he is a prohibitive favorite here. He is around minus 400. You can get Herbert around plus 300 as the underdog. Keith, I'm going to turn this over to you, but I feel as though Jai Herbert still has a ton of promise, but, having to go up against Francisco Trinaldo in your UFC debut, who is just, he's one of the most grizzled veterans in the UFC. And one of the hardest fighters in the UFC to look good against, win or lose. And then Renato Moicano, who, still capable of capturing lightning in a bottle and still very dangerous on the ground. He's just had a rough run. And here he's a 3-1 underdog against just another monster in Topuria if he doesn't want to go 1-3 in his first 4 fights in the UFC. How does this one play out? And do you still see upside in Herbert?
Yeah, dude, I'm so glad you mentioned it, because that literally was my first notes, that somebody in the UFC hates Jai Herbert, because starting off your UFC career as Francisco Trinaldo, Renato Moicano, Kama Worthy, who's not an easy foe either, and then Ilia Topuria. Jeez, it's like, what the hell? Like, what did Jai Herbert do to the UFC matchmakers? So I like Jai Herbert. I think he's a good fighter. He's a long and lengthy striker. Good footwork. He uses lots of movement to attempt to keep the distance. He wants to work from range. Lots of jabs. Nice snap on his power shots. His straight right is accurate. He's got good power. If you crowd the pocket on him, he changes it up. It looks like slicing inside elbows. Has 9 career knockouts. Even in like recent losses, he drops Trinaldo in that fight. He put Kama Worthy out. He's an underrated wrestler. Even though UFC stats don't show, he did take down Trinaldo. He's got some. I went back to like the regional scene. He's got some really slick back takes. He uses his long legs to lock up body triangles. He's a weak defensive wrestler. And like you go back to the Moicano fight, Moicano dominated with his grappling. But overall, he's a pretty good talent. Now move over to Topuria. The first thing I'm worried about, we talk about Dan Hooker. I'm also worried about Topuria. He was removed from his last fight due to a botched weight cut. But in the cage, he's fantastic. He's a well-rounded.
Are you glad he's moving up to 155 here, win or lose?
Oh yeah.
Do you think this is the spot for him? Okay.
Well, yeah. When guys miss weight, yeah. What I'm worried about is when guys miss weight, it happens a lot. Like there's guys who miss like multiple weight, like John Lineker and Kelvin Gastelum and Johnny Hendricks. And I'm not saying this. This guy's 25, so a lot of it could just be growing. So I want to point that out there. So and I know the people who love Topuria is gonna like kill me for even mentioning his weight cut. I love Topuria. Like, just I want to make that. I was like, I'm as big of a Topuria fan as there is. Like, his talent is incredible. I mean, he's well rounded. He's very accurate a striker. He gets into when he jumps into range, he unloads with hard hooks. I love his overhand right. He's got huge power. I love that he will set up his power shots by going to the body first. Like, he sets him up, works the body, understands the, you crush the body, then the head's going to open up. You're going to get the knockout. He's a very, very good wrestler. He's got a Greco-Roman background, incredible hip control. Go back to like the Yusuf Salal fight where he suplexed Salal. He's a Brazilian to black belt. He looks to advance position. He's a submission threat, very aggressive to get subs. He loves like the head attacks, the darces, your anacondas, your guillotines. He loves that topside guillotine. He showed how elite his grappling is against Ryan Hall. I mean, he didn't get submitted by Ryan Hall. Was winning the grappling against Ryan Hall before destroying him with heavy ground and pound in that fight too. So as far as prediction goes, I like Herbert a lot, but Topuria is on a whole different level. You mentioned not cutting weight as much. Obviously, I think that's going to be a good thing. Topuria is elite. I think he's going to slide in the pocket. I think he's going to land post shots. Then he's going to follow that up with takedowns, hard ground and pound. And I think he's actually might get a submission. I think he's going to land some ground and pound and then Herbert might give up his back. Topuria locks in the submission. Give me Topuria by second round. So
I like the breakdown there. I also am glad that Topuria is moving up to lightweight. I mean, for one thing, regardless of how he does competitively, I would much rather see somebody lose more fights at a weight class where their kidneys don't fail and they don't die. Like, to the point that you can be safe or as safe as possible in a sport that's about giving each other brain damage. Safety first. So, but weird thing about Topuria, like the Sherdog Fight Finder has him listed at 5'8". The UFC has him listed at 5'7". He always feels taller than that to me in the cage. Like, I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just very surprising because if he really is 5'7", he's one of the very shortest lightweights in the UFC right now, and it doesn't seem that way. So I'm interested to see Topuria, facing off at weigh-ins and in the cage with Jai Herbert, who does legit appear to be 6'1". And I should correct myself. I said Georgian born. No, he's born in Germany, ethnically Georgian, has lived and fought out of Spain for years. So anyway, again, so that our European contingent doesn't come get me too. Like, all your hate for Keith. All your hate.
Yeah, they're gonna give you shit for messing up the country, me for talking about missing weight. We get killed on this one. And we're both picking him to win. I know you're picking him to win.
Yeah, I'm picking him to win. And you pointed out that it's not just that he beat Ryan Hall, but he just completely no-sold Hall's attempts. Like, when he went to the ground, Hall started doing Hall things. He goes for, like for his 50-50 position. He starts grabbing your legs where, most fighters are like, oh shit, what's he doing? And at least they pause. And Topuria didn't even pause. He was just looking for opportunities to continue punching Hall in the face. It was savage. Like, I picked Hall to beat Topuria. I knew it was Hall was a plus 400 underdog for a reason. It was a flyer, but Topuria made it look elementary. I think that the safety valve here is, even if Herbert is able to give him stuff on the feet that he doesn't like, even if Herbert really does have a substantial advantage in reach, and when he has the advantage in reach, he does tend to try to use it to his best advantage in the stand-up. I think Topuria is going to be able to get takedowns pretty much at will against Herbert. Just not a great defensive wrestler. Topuria is a good offensive wrestler, and good at finishing takedowns in dominant positions. Like the typical Topuria takedown doesn't end with him kind of kneeling over the guy who's sitting on his butt at the edge of the fence, and you're in this kind of stalemate position for the next 2 minutes. Topuria takes people down and like slams them down, and he's in side control, or already moving towards the back. That's what this is going to look like. And so even though I think Herbert still has upside in the UFC, I don't know if he's a top 10 guy anymore. Coming in out of Cage Warriors, I would have said this guy's probably going to at least reach the top 10 at some point. I don't know if that's the case anymore, but this is a bad fight for him to try to keep any sort of momentum going. Give me Topuria by second round finish on the ground somehow. I'm going to say submission, but if he just pounds him out down there, I wouldn't be too surprised either. What method of victory did you have?
Third round submission.
Thank you.
That's another one of those fights where like, I mean, I guess there's only so many fights you can have on the main card. Like, I get that. There's another one, like, Topuria is really good. Like, he should be much higher.
Agreed. Topuria is fantastic.
Like, all the Georgian, whatever, I understand.
Yeah.
Georgian, but, like, all of them are great.
Yeah. And
for, like, such a small country, this is me kissing, because I know we're recording, this is me kissing their ass after we just bashed them. But for, like, a small country, they're, like, dominant in combat sports.
Really dominant. You remember, like, the blown weight cut last time that got him scratched from that card? You remember what the fight was going to be, right?
It was Charles Jourdain, right?
No, it was him versus Movsar Evloev. And we were like, please don't let this...
No, then Evloev dropped out. And then Jourdain took it on short notice. Like, Jourdain took it, like, in, like, a week's notice.
Okay.
And we were all going crazy, like, oh my God, look at the balls in that guy. Like, you take him that nobody wants to fight, you take it on short notice, and then he's the one that makes the weight.
Right. Topuria scratches, and Jourdain's the guy that's Instagramming pictures of himself in the hotel lobby in his trunk saying, hey, I'm on weight.
Yeah.
You know, no, I just remember being super glad that the Evloev Topuria fight fell off, because that fight, when it happens, that thing should be a title eliminator 2 years from now. Yeah, although they're probably not going to be in the same weight class anymore, because Evloev probably isn't going to move up.
Yeah.
Like, when they say Evloev is 5'7", I believe it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think you might think Topuria is bigger because of, like, he's a ripped up dude too. Like, he's got, like, big muscles and big shoulders. And, you know what I mean?
That's probably it. I've never been in the same room as him. Like, he's never been at any card I've covered live or anything. So that might be it.
I wonder how tall. How tall is Dustin Poirier? Because I've met him and he's
Dustin Poirier. He's 5'9". He is just dead on same height as me.
There's all these, like, thick dudes. Like, you see him and you're like, how the hell does this guy make 155?
How did he make 145 back in the WEC days? And the answer is not easily, and it wasn't to his best advantage.
I can't imagine what Dan Hooker's going through right now. That guy looks like a freaking middleweight.
Yeah, Hooker is huge. Like, I have been in the same room as Dan Hooker, and he is huge. Yeah,
I've been ridiculous with hookers, but not Dan Hooker.
And this time, it's not because I don't want to talk about Nikita Krylov versus Paul Craig. I do want to talk about it. It's just I had to get that off my chest. Shall we move on? Next up, this might be the prelims headliner. I mean, it's a fight night card, so it doesn't make a huge difference. You know, at worst, you have to move back in your ESPN Plus window and open another one. Anyway, it's a light heavyweight matchup between Nikita Krylov and Paul Craig. Krylov, the 30-year-old Ukrainian who trains out of Russia, and I'll get to that in a minute. 30 years old. He's 27-8 overall. He is 8-6 overall in the UFC across 2 different stints in the UFC. He's 2-3 in his current run in the UFC. And of that 8-6, he's 7-5 at light heavyweight. His first 2 fights in the UFC were at heavyweight. So that's a lot of complicated kind of stats. What you want to know is he is 1-2 in his last 3, but the losses have been to Glover Teixeira and Magomed Ankalaev. The win in between was over Johnny Walker. So he's 1-2 in the last 2 years or so, but it's against high-level competition. He's taking on Craig. The 34-year-old Scot is 15-4-1 overall. He is 7-4-1 in the UFC. He is on a 5-fight unbeaten streak that includes 4 wins and a draw with Mauricio Shogun Rua. He is on a 3-fight win streak. Those 3, a submission win over Gaji Murad Antigulov, a TKO by tapping the strikes in the rematch with Shogun, and then the arm snapping win over Jamal Hill at UFC 263 last June, where referee Al Guinea did not see where Hill's arm had been torqued, so let the fight go on. Hill kind of went into turtle mode, understandably, and Craig ended up punching him out. otherwise could have been a technical submission. Anyway, that's 3 finishes in a row. Man, let me get the odds out before I hold forth on this. Krylov is a slight favorite here. He's minus 175. Craig plus 145. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is a matchup between two of the unlikeliest light heavyweight contenders I can think of in the UFC in the last 10 years. The only other unlikeliest contender I can think of would be Anthony Smith. A guy that, 10 years ago, I'm like, okay, you're telling me that this 168-pound guy that just lost to Josh Neer in a barn in Iowa is going to be fighting John Jones for the UFC light heavyweight title 4 years from now? Get the fuck out of here.
And I really could have got a win. If he wasn't Anthony Smith, that he was.
If it wasn't Anthony Smith.
Yeah, if he didn't have character, he could have got a DQ win.
There you go. Just if he stayed down.
I got a very unlikely challenger or top light heavyweight. Not that they are, but at this time, it's unlikely. And that's the current champion, Glover Teixeira. I don't think anybody expected him to still be winning at this point in his career.
You know what? That's the perfect example. 9 years ago when he was having visa issues and he'd been living in Connecticut for 10 years, but he had to go back to Brazil for a year and get his visa fixed, then came back and he was fighting at 230 pounds in the middle of nowhere because he couldn't fight in the US. There's no way you could have told me he was going to be the UFC light heavyweight champ in 2022.
I'm talking about a couple years ago when Alexander Gustafsson is brutally knocking him out and he looks washed up, looking slow and washed up.
Okay. No, you're absolutely right. And it seemed like the unlikeliest and most impossible thing until it snuck up on us and all of a sudden, holy cow. And even then it's like, well, you know what? He's 41. We should just give him his title shot so he can swing off into the sunset and he at least fought for a title. It was almost like we were asking the UFC to do the man a charity and all of a sudden he just stomps Jan Blachowicz.
He destroyed him. Wasn't even a close match.
That's it. Of course we have a couple of unlikely challengers because it is the unlikely division. Very, very good call on Teixeira there.
Used to be the glamour division, too.
Used to be the glamour division. Yeah, that's the secret about light heavyweight. It's always been a terrible division. Just usually they hide that under some nice sauce on top because there are a couple of superstars up there. But man, because the thing is, how differently would we
think at one time it was really at the peak of the UFC versus Pride days, it was the best division in MMA. I mean, at least name-wise, when you had Vanderlei Silva and Shogun and Sakuraba and Kato Rona, Little Nog, and Alice Overeem, and Vitor Belfort, and Igor Vovchanchyn, Dean Lister. Then you had the UFC with Couture and Ortiz and Liddell, and who else? Randleman was in there. Mark Coleman at one point made 205. I mean,
he was doing that as late as 2011.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm forgetting other people.
But even then, if you looked at the number 10 light heavyweight in the UFC, you're really, that dude was top 10? There was still not a ton of depth. Yeah. And part of that is because the top talent was split, and frankly, was split with 2/3 of it in Pride. Once the UFC absorbed Pride in 2007 and kind of brought it all under one roof, it was a hell of a division. Obviously, but yeah. Anyway, off track. All I'm trying to say is I didn't think Paul Craig and Nikita Krylov would be top 10 contenders fighting each other in 2022.
I didn't think Paul Craig would still be in the UFC in 2022.
No.
And now he's in the rankings.
He's in the rankings.
Rightly so.
And it's not even the old jokes, the old punchlines about both these guys no longer really hold true anymore. Because the thing about Craig was, well, he's going to get his ass kicked, and then he's either going to pull out a last-minute sub or he won't. But these days, that's not it anymore. If he was going to beat Jamal Hill, I would have guessed that it's one of those where Hill just thrashes him, gets maybe a 10-8 round somewhere, and then Craig just snatches something out of nowhere in the last minute of the fight. But no, Craig took it to him from the beginning. In the rematch with Shogun, he busted Shogun up on the feet. And yeah, it's the ghost of Shogun, but the ghost of Shogun is still generally capable of taking care of himself on the feet, and Craig just beat the crap out of him. He's not the Hail Mary guy anymore. He's on a 5-fight unbeaten streak, and Jamal Hill is a top 10 quality guy. It's something, man. And then Nikita Krylov, I mean, you're an old Jordan Breen show head yourself. He was Jordan's favorite guy to laugh out for the longest time, because when he started in the UFC, his Fight Finder picture was him standing in a trench coat with UFC gloves on back when he wasn't in the UFC yet, calling himself the Fighting Al Capone. And you remember this, he debuted against Soa Palele in one of the worst fights I've ever seen. Like, his first 2 fights in the UFC, I think it was Soa Palele and Walt Harris, and he was terrible. And then even after that, when he cut to 205, he became a guy with tons of potential that was just capable of losing a fight in horrible and stupid ways at any moment. Like, of course, he was the first guy to get Von Prude. Like, he's the guy that the original, Ovin St. Preux, Von Prude choke was on, because he's exactly the guy that's just going to find a weird way to lose a fight. He's not that anymore. All of a sudden, it's not as fun, but he is a perfect gatekeeper to the top 10. He's 2-3 in his most recent run in the UFC, but the losses are to Jan Blachowicz, Glover Teixeira, and Magomed Ankalaev. If I told you that those are the top 3 light heavyweights in the division right now, you might not agree with me, but you wouldn't laugh. It's very possible that those are the 3 best guys in the division. And the 2 guys he's beaten, Johnny Walker, who, I mean, he's falling from grace now, but at the time he was top 15, and Ovin St. Preux, who in April 2019 was top 15.
Oh, at the time, yeah.
Yeah, like that's who.
You know, the most surprising thing about Paul Craig is him and Jamal Hill fought. Paul Craig mangled Jamal Hill's arm, and Jamal Hill returned before Paul Craig did. How surprising is that?
That is pretty surprising.
That's it. That's all.
Krylov is what he is as a fighter at this point. He's a very aggressive striker, likes to throw lots of kicks. He has good power. He's a good offensive grappler, but I cringe every time I see him go down there, because that's the one place where his fight IQ is not improved. He gets in terrible positions on the floor. Like, I know he and Ovin St. Preux have fought twice already, and if they fight again, Krylov would be like a 4-1 favorite, but I still wouldn't be putting Von Preux choke out of the question, because he's just the kind of guy that would hold on to a guillotine too long as a guy like moves over to side mount. And that's bad news against Craig. Craig is a huge light heavyweight. He's slow on his feet. His hands are kind of slow. Decent power. I would say Krylov has more pure power. I expect Krylov to get the better of the striking. Like, I think he's faster. I think he hits harder. Neither of them is super defensively sound, but I think Krylov is probably a little more defensively sound on the feet. But the big equalizer to me is this fight is going to end up on the ground at some point. And when it gets to the ground, I trust Craig and I don't trust Krylov. So even though Krylov is the favorite, and even though Krylov could easily win this thing by knockout in 4 minutes and it never goes to the ground, I'm not willing to bet on that as the main chance. So give me Paul Craig. I'm going to say by second round submission. And it's probably going to be in a fight that Krylov was doing very well up until he wasn't.
Yeah, that's exactly. If Craig wins, that's exactly how it's going, and that's probably the way you should make a pick. This is
just you saying that you're not going to make that pick.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. And, Paul Craig is, I don't know. I can't read either one of these guys, if I'm being honest. Like, I feel like I do pretty well at reading fighters. Obviously, I don't make the best picks. There's guys better out there than I am, but I don't know if anybody else went 14-0 last week. But other than that, so Paul Craig, like, he's this massive light heavyweight. He really looks like a heavyweight. His boxing is like so raw. It's the only way that I can describe it. Like, a lot of arm punches, keeps his chin high in the air, just asking to be knocked out. He does throw a lot of long range kicks, what I like, and the reason why I like it, obviously, one of them of the kicks will do damage, but more so is that he'll throw kicks hoping that his opponent catches it, takes him down, and puts him in his guard. Like, he's a guy who likes to, like his favorite position is being on his back and guard, which it's such a throwback in MMA because, like, Randy Couture said something once that, like, BJJ is dead, and a lot of people got pissed off, and obviously I think Randy was talking in a very broad sense in that. And I think he more was talking about the sense of the old BJJ guy coming in and destroying everyone. And it was more of a everybody does BJJ now. So it wasn't like he was saying it was dead in the sense that it doesn't work. It was more it's equalized because everybody knows these submissions now. If that makes sense. Like I think it was almost like kind of complimenting it in a really backwards way. But Craig is that throwback guy who like pulls guard. If he can't get the fight to the ground, he'll pull guard. He obviously is submission where it subs off his back. Terrible takedown defense, but again, like I don't know if he's even trying to stop a takedown. But the thing about him, he gets these submissions, but I still don't look at him as this like dominant elite grappler, which is I don't know. Maybe I need to start giving him more credit than I do. And that's what I'm saying. I know I read this guy wrong because he's gotten wins and subs over some really good people and winning. Krylov is another guy that I just don't have a read on. I mean, he's so hard to grasp because he's so inconsistent. One fight, he looks like a title challenger. The next fight, he looks like a bum. So I don't know what you're going to get. I mean, he's athletic. He's pretty well-rounded.
Let me ask you one thing real quick. Like, you have a hard time getting a handle on him. So do I. He just turned 30 last week. Considering how long he's been in the UFC, like he debuted when he was like 21.
Yeah.
Is it possible that he's not even reached his final form yet?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he's a light heavyweight and he's barely 30.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. And that's it's not heavyweight where you can be like really old, but that's an older division, generally speaking. Than
Glover Teixeira.
Yeah, there you go. They're the champions.
And Jan Blachowicz is 38. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. And how old is Glover? 42?
Like yep.
Yeah. I mean, he's probably Teixeira's probably the second best athlete. He was 42 years old.
Yeah.
Besides, I have to throw out there my boy. Newly did his MMA retirement, returning Tom Brady. Back to this fight. So I mean, Krylov, he's like I said, he's well rounded. He moves well. He's got good footwork. He's got some pretty fast hands. You mentioned he's got good output. He's fun, but he makes mistakes of dropping his hands, especially as the fight goes deeper. A lot of kicks. It's inconsistent he is on the feet. I'm glad you mentioned him on the ground. He's even more inconsistent on the ground. Like he's a solid wrestler. He'll get good entries, good takedowns in one fight, and the next fight he's getting easily out grappled by I saw OSP and I almost said GSP. I'm sure he would out grapple him too. OSP like took him down at one point. OSP mounted him, and that was the fight. That's the fight that he won.
He won, and it's just because OSP's cardio was like the worst cardio ever seen in a non-heavyweight fight.
Yeah, and he's also like a very inconsistent fighter himself.
Yeah.
But then he has 15 career submissions, Krylov. He almost submitted Glover Teixeira. So, to his credit, he's got a pretty good get-up game. We get in one fight, and the next fight he gets like stuck on the bottom for like 3 minutes straight. So, I have no idea. This fight is tough. Krylov is so inconsistent, and I've counted out Craig so many times. That said, I'm picking Krylov. He is the better wrestler. He should be the one on top. And you mentioned he's 29. Like, he's not a finished product. He's going to have to avoid submission attempts. He'll probably, I don't know. He'll probably, like, knowing Krylov, he'll probably, like, winning the fight, be a minute away from securing the win, and then, like, drop down, like, a heel hook to give Craig a position or something. Or it's one round each, and he's on top. And he Sorrel Gons goes for heel hook to give up the position. I don't know, but against my better judgment, I'm taking Krylov by decision.
There you go. Some dissension where neither of us is super comfortable with this pick. Oh, the other thing I just wanted to mention, obviously there's a ton going on with Ukrainian and Russian fighters. Like, are they going to make it to the fights? Like, are they going to say something on the mic afterwards? Like, are they going to wave their flag? What I was going to say about Krylov is he is Ukrainian born and like very proudly so. Like, his nickname is no longer Al Capone. It's now the Miner, and it's speaking about his father and grandfather being miners in the Ukraine. But he's lived and trained in Russia for the longest time. Like, he trains with a Russian team, and there's a very easily findable photo of him on Google, like an official UFC photo taken, in front of their gray background where he's holding Russian and Ukrainian flags behind him. The interesting thing is that the UFC and their stuff leading up to this, they have no flag next to him. And I wonder, I'm guessing that that's at his own request, because other Ukrainian fighters have had the Ukrainian flag. All these Dagestanis have had the Russian flag. I wonder if in Krylov's case, it's just because living in Russia, he doesn't want to have the Ukrainian flag up there just at risk of,
And he's living in Russia right now. Like he's training.
Yeah. He lives and trains in Russia. So I'm not criticizing it at all. I understand it completely. Like, if
what a terrible,
it is terrible.
It's terrible. Like, something we're privileged. In most of the world, we're privileged to not even be close to experiences. Like, all right, for example, here's a perfect example. I'm married. I'm married to a Canadian. My wife was born and raised in Canada. She went down to college down here. That's how we met each other, and we got married. And she recently became an American citizen, but she's still Canadian. Like her entire family. She's the only one in her family down here. She's going up. We went up for Christmas. She's going up in April. Like I couldn't imagine if Canada and America got into a war, and suddenly her family's our enemy, and vice versa. Sure. My wife is an enemy now, or
if your wife had like a Canadian flag thing on her desk at work, would you just take that thing down quietly? Which is what I feel about Krylov. You know,
it's just I'm not picking a side. I don't know. I don't follow this enough. I probably should. It's just terrible in general. And innocent people. It's just terrible.
Yeah, I'm comfortable saying I'm on the side of this. This should not be happening right now.
Yeah, me too. I'm on that side. Like, I just don't know enough about. I honestly don't know what they're fighting about. I know that sounds terrible.
And the answer to that is going to vary based on whom you ask, which is definitely too long a side conversation for the preview.
Yeah. But I think anybody could say war is always terrible. So, yeah.
And what a perfect lead into talking about a fight between two Russians. You ready for Abdurakhimov versus Pavlovich?
Yeah.
Next up at UFC Fight Night 204 is a heavyweight matchup between Shamil Abdurakhimov and Sergei Pavlovich. Abdurakhimov, the 40-year-old Dagestani, is 20-6 overall. He is 5-4 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight losing streak, those two being against Curtis Blades and most recently against Chris Daukaus. Daukaus knocked him out in the second round at UFC 266 last September. The Blades loss was a full 2 years before that. Like, he fought in 2019, got mauled by Blades, took 2 full years off, came back last year at age, I think he was 39 at the time, lost to Daukaus. So, he's looking to stop a 3-fight skid from happening. It's worth noting that before that, he was on a 3-fight win streak. He'd beaten Chase Sherman, Andrei Arlovsky, and Marcin Tybura. And Arlovsky in 2018 was still a very credible win, and Tybura in 2019 was, Tybura was and is a top 10 quality fighter. But yeah, he's been in rough shape of late, and now he gets to try to turn it around against, I certainly think, one of the more impressive prospects in the division in Pavlovich. Pavlovich, the 29-year-old Russian, is 14-1 overall. He is 2-1 in the UFC. He lost his debut to Alistair Overeem. He came in as a highly touted Russian prospect. Like, he's Russian, but came from Eagles MMA. Like, he was a Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov guy, and got beat by Overeem. Was kind of one of those last reminders of, oh yeah, Alistair Overeem's top game is actually even scarier than his striking. Overeem just pounded the shit out of him at the base of the cage. Yeah. Since then, he's had 2 straight first-round knockouts over Marcelo Golm and Maurice Green. Both of those took about a minute apiece. He is coming back for the first time in over 2 years. The Green win was back in October of 2019. Well, it was over Maurice Green. That's all you need to know about how long ago it was. Despite the long layoff, he is a strong favorite here. He's minus 300. Abdurakhimov plus 240 as the underdog. Keith, I'm definitely going to throw this to you first, but I remember once upon a time thinking that Shamil Abdurakhimov was a sneaky, high ceiling guy in the UFC heavyweight division, even though he was already in his late 30s. I'm like, it's not like being 37 matters here. And this guy's not losing to anybody. I could see him like even sneaking his way to a title shot, and it all seems to have gone off a cliff. Does he get it turned around ever? And does he get it turned around against Sergei Pavlovich?
Yeah, Derek Lewis ruined all that.
Yeah, Derek.
Yeah, I think that's hard to believe at this point. I mean, he's had some big losses since then. He looked bad recently too. Yeah. So things about Abdurakhimov standpoint, he's a big burly dude, but the one thing about him, he's surprisingly deceivingly good movement for like when you look at his physique. He has like a very Tim Sylvia type body, but he moves well. He's really light on his feet, but like for a guy who's big, he's a point fighter. Not a lot of power. He throws long shots from the outside, tend to be single shots. He likes his like fade back uppercuts, which don't really land for him. He can clinch and grind in the clinch, and that's probably one of his better positions. But and if he's taking it down, he does do well to work back to his feet. But he has 4 career subs, which he's a bigger submission threat that he's known for. Now move over to Pavlovich. Pavlovich is the guy that, like, we talk about guys off for a long time. Like, I completely forgot about him. And like you mentioned, he's one of the better guys in the division. Like, do we know what was it? Was it just COVID? Like, why was he out for so long? Do we know?
I don't remember all the reasons. I'm trying to remember whether
there was a visa issue in there somewhere. I know that. Like, he was booked against somebody. Like, I feel like he was booked against somebody good. And then,
yeah, let me take a look here while you talk about his skills. Yeah, I mean, he had a fight with Cyril Gane canceled in 2020, and then a fight with Aspinall in 2021 that was for that card that was supposed to be in London and ended up being in Vegas, and then Tanner Boser in December, and all of them were canceled.
Yeah. So talk about that. So somehow he found a way to not fight Cyril Gane and not fight Tom Aspinall, but somehow found a way to fight Shamil Abdurakhimov. Nice job, Sergei Pavlovich. Good job.
Man. Yeah, it was visa issues for Pavlovich.
Yeah,
in
it's
his
weird
last
how
couple
the
fights.
visa doesn't matter now, but no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, he's as you mentioned, he's only 29 years old, which is like being like 14 in heavyweight years. He's a good athlete. He's got fast hands, crisp striking. He really has a good right hand. They talked about it in his last, I think it was the Maurice Green. They kept talking about the power in his right hand. I think he actually dropped Maurice Green with the right hand. Good power. He doesn't check leg kicks. I don't like. He can go for a takedown, but when he's on top, more of a controlling guy, ground and pound guy. He isn't much of a submission threat. And as you mentioned, he showed if you put him on his back, like Alistair Overeem does, he struggles. Now, he's looked great his last 2 fights, but the one time he's fought a really high-level guy, he lost. So you really wonder, like, this Alistair Overeem, this is a couple years ago, Alistair Overeem, is who he's lost to. He's beaten Maurice Green. Like, that's a huge gap, and somewhere in between is Abdurakhimov. Now, I'm gonna take Pavlovich. He's younger, he's faster, he's more explosive, and I don't trust Abdurakhimov. He looked a little slower against Christakis. His chin might be gone. He was knocked out pretty quickly. I feel like Pavlovich moves similar to what Christakis does. Like, they're both probably like the pluser athletes in the division. So I'm gonna say Pavlovich kind of has his like kind of coming out party, and I think he finds a chin and he wins by first round knockout.
Yeah, I'm with you here. At his best, it was surprising how nimble and athletic Abdurakhimov was, in contrast to kind of the balding, burly, barrel-chested guy. But that is slipping, and as you point out, maybe his chin is slipping as well. Blades, like taking him down and mauling him is not that surprising. That's Curtis Blades' game, but that's something that I think Pavlovich could duplicate if he wanted. And then Dawkins just catching the slower man on the feet and hurting him and following up and putting him down. Because it wasn't a one-shot knockout for Dawkins. Dawkins just stung him with better power and then kept it going and kept following up. That's something that Pavlovich could do as well. Unless he's really fallen off a cliff, just in, 2 years of being on the shelf with visa issues. This is his fight to lose. I suspect that he's going to catch Abdurakhimov, hurt him, and put him away early as well. So give me Pavlovich by first round knockout too.
Now, what is this nonsense I'm reading about the Jacksonville Jaguars signed Christian Kirk $84 million? Like the Cardinals, like number 3 wide receiver or something. The hell? Wow. It says, I'm reading this, and it says, I'm on the website, and it pops up like little nuggets on the side, so I click on it, and it said if he receives all 84, he'd be the 3rd highest paid receiver in the NFL. What the hell?
That's
I didn't know that. I didn't think it was good.
I mean, I know, the contracts, a lot of them is just the result of timing and needs, but
sure,
quality on paper, that's.
Yeah, and this is not a football podcast where I know where.
It's whatever kind of podcast we want it to be.
Yeah, I love football. That's my number 2 sport. Well, actually, I'd say amateur wrestling is probably my number 2, and then football would be my number 3. This week, do you want to know? I can't wait for this weekend. This is the NCAA wrestling kicks off.
So when you watch the NCAA's now, as I do, how much of it for you is appreciation of the art, and how much of it is like scouting, like the next crop of MMA fighters?
It's so tough. That's tough. What I like about it is I don't say I use it as scouting, because you don't know who's going to make a jump over. Right. But it's more of refreshing me. I'll recognize names when they come over. Like a guy that if I like UFC wouldn't be interested, but like Bellator, the guy that I would go after, I would see. I don't want to. I would have a representative for Bellator at the NCAA's, and as soon as Austin DeSanto has his last match, Austin DeSanto is a 133-pounder for Ohio. Iowa. He's going to be it's most likely that he becomes an All-American, so he'll be a 4-time All-American. It's most likely going to happen. He's got I'd say an outside shot of winning the entire thing. I think he's the 4th seed, and that was because of the divisional things, but he's probably overall the 3rd. The problem is he's got to go against Roman Bravo Young, the reigning national champion. They'd have to face each other in the semis, but I think they split each other the last 2 matches. But my point is, why Austin DeSanto stands out to me is like this guy's got personality. It's like you can watch like documentaries and like he got like a little bit of mini brawl with Nick Soriano, who's the number 1 guy at 125, and just he's got the charisma, and he's an elite level wrestler. That's the guy you need. AJ Ferrari is another. He's not wrestling because he's injured, but that was like a guy. But yeah, like guys like that, those are what I try to find the guys who have the personalities that could fit. Like Spencer Lee's incredible, but Spencer Lee is, when he's done wrestling, he's going to the Olympics, and then and then he's going on to coaching or something.
Yeah, he'll be an associate or an assistant coach somewhere, the next year.
He's made to be in wrestling forever.
Yeah. Speaking of wrestling, how about Gunnar Nelson versus Takashi Sato?
Hit me up later, guys, and I'll give you all my NCAA predictions, wrestling predictions.
There you go.
I love it. I think I'm the only sidetrack. I think I'm the only person who like. If you're an Iowa fan, you like Austin DeSanto. Not even that. I don't know. I love Austin DeSanto. Like everyone hates the guy. I love him. But he brings excitement. Like he's different. That's what I like about him.
Yeah, it's
like AJ Ferrari. Everyone hates AJ. I love AJ Ferrari. I'm the biggest AJ Ferrari fan there is.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the personalities have a tendency to run together. Yeah. I mean, it's less so now than it was 20 years ago. But in broad strokes, the NCAA's look like a bunch of farm boys with cauliflower ear.
Right. Talking about how hard they work and thank you, Jesus, and I work so hard.
Yeah.
And this guy's the hardest working guy in the room. Like, there, we had that many times. I want the personality.
Like if you're there, you've been the hardest working person in the room probably your whole life. Like we get what it's like to come up through wrestling, but Next up at
I'll say this right now. I don't give a shit about the NCAA basketball. Like private colleges, I hope they win. They're probably going to Bryant College, which is another little Rhode Island one. They're the playing game. I hope they win the whole freaking thing. But
beyond that,
we care more about the NCAA.
Sure Dog doesn't have an office pool for it, so we don't care. Yeah. We're waiting for fantasy football to come around so we can meet in the championship game for the third year in a row.
You beat me. You beat me 2 years in a row in the finals.
Hey, you're becoming like the 1980s Denver Broncos of the like.
No, like the Buffalo,
the Bills.
Yeah,
the 90s Bills. Next up at UFC London is a welterweight matchup between Gunnar Nelson and late notice opponent Takashi Sato, who steps in for Claudio Silva, who pulled out just about a week ago. And, now we get Nelson versus Sato. Nelson, the 33-year-old Icelander by way of SBG Ireland, is 17-5-1 overall. He is 8-5 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight losing streak, but in his defense, they're both really good fighters in Leon Edwards and Gilbert Burns. And the more worrying factor is that the last of those losses was in September of 2019. It's been 30 months on the shelf for him. He comes back now. Again, had been scheduled to face Claudio Silva. Silva withdrew with an injury and is replaced by Sato. Sato, 31-year-old from Tokyo, is 15-4 overall. He is 2-2 in the UFC. He's alternated wins and losses, those being a win over Ben Saunders, a loss to Bilal Muhammad, a win over Jason Witt, and a loss to Miguel Baeza. The last of those, the Baeza loss, was all the way back in November of 2020. So for him, it's been 16 or 17 months, but he now makes his comeback. Nelson is a strong favorite here. He's minus 350, Sato plus 275. Keith, tell us how you feel about the return of our favorite karate stance, jiu-jitsu wizard, Icelander, and his late notice opponent in Sato.
So this is 3 for 3 on guys that I forgot about. Gunnar Nelson. Gunnar, when we last saw him, I mean, he's been out so long, so you're kind of basing it on what we've previously known of him. So we see a guy that's going to be completely shot, as far as I know. But we last seen him, karate stylist. He does keep his hands low with that karate style, very Stephen Thompson style. He's got a wide stance. He makes you he leaves himself open to leg kicks because on that front stance, but he also draws power because of that. He switches stance. He fights out of both sides. Light on his feet, pretty elusive. Good footwork to avoid shots. Good vision. He likes to sit all the way back and then just dart in with an attack. Usually a single strike though. Good calf kicks. Very underrated wrestler in the sense, like good trips inside. Has I think he has like a judo background too, because he's got really like judo trips and stuff. But he's a very good wrestler in the sense, like he took down Leon Edwards 3 times in that fight. People forget that, like he does a split decision with Leon Edwards. He's a fantastic BJJ practitioner. He's trained and competed in some of the best tournaments there is.
He's a Mundial silver medalist.
There you go. Yeah. I didn't have off the top of my head his credentials, but they're way up there. All you got to see is his fights against Stephen Meyer and Gil Burns, like 2 of the greatest grapples in history of MMA, and he didn't get subbed by either one of them and won moments in both their fights. And he's got 12 career submissions. Move on to Sato. Southpaw marches forward, nice 1-2 punches, has good power at his strikes, really steps in on shots, but makes the mistake of throwing single shots. He also makes the mistake of throwing the same overhand left over and over again, very predictable. He lacks head movement. His last fight, he was hurt by that. Like Miguel Baeza hurt him several times. I like that he took a long time off. Makes me a little more confident in his chin because he got hurt a couple times. Maybe he's recovered a little bit. He's not much of a grappler. He can get an offensive takedown, but he's a weak defensive wrestler. He struggles to get off the bottom. We saw that last fight, and he was quickly submitted in his last fight when it hit the ground by Miguel Baeza. As far as prediction goes, to me, this simply comes down to what does Gunnar Nelson have left? He's lost some fights, his last couple fights recently, but he's fought really good guys. Like he's lost to the top guys. He's if he is close to what we've last seen him, he's a better athlete. He's a better striker. He's the way better grappler. I expect Nelson to get a takedown. I expect him to sub Sato early. I think it's a terrible stylistic matchup. Give me Nelson by first round submission.
Totally agree here that the biggest question is whether Nelson is compromised at all. Because I don't have a real good insight into his mindset. Like I don't know if he was ever going to fight again, or if he was just going to pop up if and when the UFC had another card in the UK or somewhere in Europe that was convenient to him. But I agree with you that where he left off, he was still an elite welterweight. He was losing to the best of the best, like Gilbert Burns, Leon Edwards, Santiago Ponzinibbio, and everyone else. He wasn't just beating them; he was submitting them, and he was like dominant in doing so.
And that Ponzinibbio one was a real controversial. That was one with the eye pokes and everything.
Right, there you go. And controversy or no, getting knocked out in the first round by Santiago Ponzinibbio is something that's just it happened to a lot of people in 2017. Assuming he is anything like what we last saw in the octagon, yeah, he is a terrible matchup for Sato. He's probably better everywhere, but the difference on the ground in particular is going to be a problem. I can't get out of my mind what an easy time Miguel Baeza had on the ground with Sato. And Baeza is a good MMA grappler. Gunnar Nelson is a great MMA grappler, as well as a great grappler, period, in the world of grappling. So give me Nelson by second round submission. And the only real suspense for me will be whether it sounds like he wants to keep doing this. Like if he's calling out somebody for a card 3 or 4 months from now, fantastic. If we're just going to see him periodically, when there's a card in the UK or Ireland, that's fine too. We head now to the lightweight division for a matchup between Paddy Pimblett and Rodrigo Vargas. Pimblett, the 27-year-old Liverpool native, is 17-3 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC as a former Cage Warriors featherweight champ and a former Cage Warriors lightweight title challenger. Didn't quite make it to 2-division status, but was the featherweight champ. He had his UFC debut in September against Luigi Vendramini. Got in a little bit of trouble there, but ended up on the good side of it. Got a TKO late in the first round. He will be taking on Vargas. The 36-year-old Mexican is 12-4 overall. He is 1-2 in the UFC. Lost his first two against Alex da Silva Coelho and Brock Weaver. The Brock Weaver fight was a weird one because he was probably getting the better of it, then landed a blatantly illegal knee and ended up losing by disqualification. Came back over a year after that, last April, and took a unanimous decision over Zhu Rong at UFC 261. Despite that, he is a substantial underdog here. Pimblett is -400 right now. Vargas +310 as the underdog. Keith, who do you like in this one? Is Paddy Pimblett going to keep winning enough to keep making people mad? He seems to be a magnet for both love and hate, a divisive figure.
Yeah, that's the perfect guy you want. I mean, how he wasn't signed earlier, and I know he turned down a contract with the UFC, but like how other organizations didn't pursue him is mind-boggling. Like we always talk about like that talent with a talent and marketability mix. He's got a little bit of both. Like he might be more a little bit on the marketable side than on the talent. But if I'm building an organization, I want elite talent, I want marketability, and then I want the guys who do both. And if they don't fit one of those three, I don't want them. But he's two of them, obviously. He's got it. Like he's got the marketability, and he may have the talent to back it up. I am not as high. Which is funny, I'm saying this. I'm not as high on Paddy Pimblett's talent as a lot of other people are. That said, like he's winning right now in the UFC. One of the reasons why I really like Paddy Pimblett in this fight is, yeah, he's got tons of experience, like high level experience. Like Cage Warriors is a good organization, But besides that, like he loves the crowd. He's a guy who lives in that moment, and he's gonna get probably the biggest pop from the crowd. And he just feels like a guy who's made for someone who's set up in London to fight in the UFC to get a win. Like this just seems like his moment now. He for a long time I called him a one-dimensional fighter, and I think he's starting to really improve on his feet. His boxing's still limited, but I used to sleep on his power, and he did show his last fight that he's got some sting in his shots. He does make the mistake of dropping his hands. He does back straight up, but he's pretty elusive. He throws a lot of kicks. He's to all parts of the body. Like he throws question mark kicks, goes down to the legs. Throw occasional flying attack. A lot of stuff's just to like kind of like either kick him way outside or like kind of close the distance or something crazy. When he gets inside, he likes the upper body traps. Not a powerful wrestler, but he's more of a guy he just wants to create a scramble, and he's confident enough when the scramble happens, he'll get the back or get the better position. He's got really weak takedown defense, but again, I think that goes kind of what we talked about Paul Craig, where he's willing to just take me down. But he's very flexible, slick back takes. He is submission threat, and he changed submissions to that. That's his best point. He's always moving to the next submission as you're fighting out of it. Out of the first submission. Now, Vargas, you mentioned, very aggressive to a fault in the Brock Weaver fight. But southpaw, I'd say he's a minus athlete, kind of plotting, stalking kind of style, but he's got plus power. Nice kicks. Will occasionally look for takedown. He'll catch a takedown. And go back to the Brock Weaver. He got like a nice, I think he got a single and he like ran the pipe on it. But he doesn't do much when he's on top. He has 3 subs, but his last sub was 5.5 years ago. As far as predictions go, like again, I'm not sold on Pimblett like others are, but this really is a softball in the sense of what the UFC could do with him in England. I mean, they found a guy that is on the roster and is one of the lower level guys in the division. So if Pimblett loses this one, then I'll really jump off the Pimblett bandwagon, which I don't think I'm on anyways. But I'm going to say Pimblett closes the distance, creates a scramble, and then finds a submission in the scramble. Give me Pimblett by first round sub.
There you go. And you're right that, and this is not meant to be any slight on Vargas. I mean, he's a good fighter. He's 12-4. He's in the UFC. But yeah, this is a softball. Like, Pimblett isn't fighting Ilia Topuria right now. Even though Topuria is fighting at lightweight, earlier down the card. There's a difference in strength of schedule for these guys. Like, Pimblett could have been in the UFC earlier than he was, but he was fighting good competition in Cage Warriors. His one featherweight title defense in Cage Warriors was against Julian Erosa. Erosa's in the UFC right now, and it turns out he's not bad. His attempt at winning the vacant lightweight title was against Soren Bach. He lost to Soren Bach, but you know what? Bach is in Bellator right now, and he could absolutely be in the UFC. Like, Soren Bach is like on a 10-fight winning streak. Like he's like he might be one of the next people that like I argue to start kind of creeping up on the bottom of the rankings. Like he was fighting good people in Cage Warriors. So Vargas is absolutely not the best fighter that Pimblett has faced, whereas Pimblett is the best fighter that Vargas has faced. And I think that's going to tell here. Pimblett, I think, like, I'm not completely sold on him either. And I mean, I would have been kind of laughing if Luigi Vendramini had lamped him in September, but I almost think we watched Pimblett get his octagon jitters out. Like he got rocked, he was in trouble, he recovered, he got the rousing victory, and 2 minutes later he was his cocky self on the mic, just doing his thing. I don't think Vargas is even going to get that much. Give me Pimblett by, I'm going to say second round submission, but I don't think he's even going to give Vargas his moments. Like he's going to outstrike him on the feet. I think it'll go to the ground when Pimblett says it does, and he has a huge advantage there. So give me Paddy Pimblett by second round submission, and the crowd will go wild.
Yeah.
The only difference is like none of them will be booing him. Like in an American show, it'd be like half boos and half cheers. But
those people are crazy. I was at Connecticut with Brandon Ward, his return. And that was one of the loudest crowds I've ever heard.
Really?
Yeah, it was crazy. It nice moment. The guy coming out with all his drug issues and stuff and beating drugs. It was nice.
That's good. The co-main event of UFC Fight Night 204 is a featherweight matchup between Arnold Allen and Dan Hooker. Allen, the 17-1 Englishman, 28 years old, is a perfect 8-0 since joining the UFC out of Cage Warriors, of course. Most recently fought last April, where he took a unanimous decision over Sadiq Youssef. Prior to that, he beat Nick Lentz, Gilbert Melendez, Jordan Rinaldi. He's been in the UFC since 2015. And again, aside from a somewhat sporadic schedule, he's typically just fought once or twice per year, pretty much unimpeachable. He is taking on Hooker. Hooker, 32-year-old New Zealander, is 21-11 overall. He is 8-4 in the UFC. Went 3-3 at lightweight. Lost 3 of his last 4 against Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, and Islam Makhachev. Those with a win over Nasrat Haqparast nestled in between. Decided his best chances to make it to a title lay back at featherweight. So he is dropping back down to the division where he went 5-1. His only loss was to Edson Barboza back in 2018. Hooker is the slight favorite here. He is minus 120. Allen, even money, plus 100. Keith, how do you like this move for Dan Hooker? And who do you see getting his hand raised on Saturday?
Yeah, I don't like to move down. I think if anything, I think Dan Hooker probably should have went up in weight because like being big is not his issue. Honestly, I don't think when I look at Dan Hooker's game, I don't see a lot of big issues. I just think he fought really, really good guys and lost to really, really good guys. Based on my prediction, like if he looks good on the scale, I might take him. If he looks terrible on the scale, I will probably go against him. I can only base him on what I've seen recently. Now I know a lot of people say, well, he hasn't been good at 145, as you mentioned, and that very well might be the case. He might just be a better fighter at 155, or it could just simply be a guy who kind of came into his own. I don't know. What I've seen of him, he uses movement well. He does really good at pulling fighters into his punches. He did it against Felder. He did it against Haqparast. He was trying to do it to Chandler until he got tagged. He keeps distance with his check left hook. He can hit while backing up, which is pretty impressive. He keeps range with check knees, which I love. That he kind of like either feint with his knees, or just kind of remind wrestlers they're there, or just throw them. Accurate with his shots, good pop on his strikes. He's got plus power, but I'm worried with the draining his body cannot wait. I wonder if the power will be there. He's got some really long legs, which are obviously open to leg kicks because of the big target. But he uses his long legs to make it really hard to take him down. When guys have tried to pick him off, he kind of like almost has that like you can't single leg him because like one leg is still easily on the ground. Now, obviously there's the exceptions, and that exception is Islam Makhachev took it on easily. But, good calf kicks. I mean, he beat up Al Iaquinta with those kicks. He actually forced Al Iaquinta to fight southpaw. But on the flip side, I mentioned about his legs being big targets. Barboza tore up his legs. I mean, they were one of the most brutal beatdowns of kicking out his legs. I would say he's a very underrated offensive wrestler. He'll get takedowns from the clinch. He has this like nice slide by against the clinch where he gets your back. He can shoot. He took Dustin Poirier down 4 times. He also catch a kick to take it down. He defends takedowns by just stretching his legs wide, which is obviously he's so long it works for him, and then throwing downward elbows. Though he did get taken down late in the Dustin Poirier fight, which I don't like. I also don't like the amount of damage he's taken recently. I'm talking about the Barboza fight, the Poirier fight, the Felder fight, and then obviously the KO loss to Michael Chandler is disturbing. Move over to Arnold Allen, 28 years old. I mean, he's right in his prime years. Southpaw, really good footwork, good lateral movement. Does well to slide into the pocket and land shots. He throws straight shots down the pipe. Not a lot of tells. Everything's short. He likes to lead with his power left hand, and it's accurate. I like his. I saw this one technique he does. He was like sliding to his right and then uppercutting as he's circling away, which was a really nice angle. He was get a different angle, a different look. I really like that shot. Um, Underrated power too. Like I don't think Arnold Allen is a guy who like really can crack. But you go back to the last fight against Sadiq Yusuf. He hurt him twice. He's got a sneaky high kick. He hurt Sadiq Yusuf with a high kick. But he is open to leg kicks. Yusuf was really destroying his legs, which we've seen Yusuf do to a lot of fighters with leg kicks. He also doesn't like being pressured. I noticed that in the fight. If you pressure him too much and he can close the distance, he's good at just grinding against the cage. He's willing to have big portions of the fight, just him grinding the cage. He's a great offensive wrestler, good entries. But he faded late against Yusuf fight. Like he showed he was getting tired. Man, I'm really torn on this fight. Like I like both guys. I'm really concerned what we're gonna get with Dan Hooker at 145. I'm gonna take Hooker. You know what? He has a lot of experience. He has battled the better fighters. I'm gonna take him to land the better shots on the feet. However, I'm gonna put this little caveat, which I don't do. Come Friday when he weighs in, if he looks like shit, I'm gonna switch my pick. But right now, I'm gonna take Hooker by decision.
I feel the same concern you do, and while I don't normally watch the weigh-ins that closely for the reason of who looked terrible on the scale or who looked scared at the face-off or anything like that, certainly for someone like Hooker who is dropping back down in weight in his early 30s, that's worth keeping an eye on. I have concerns about Allen as well. I mean, the guy debuted in the UFC all the way back in 2015. He was 21 years old, had all the potential in the world. And since then, again, since 2015, he's only fought more than once in a calendar year one time, and that was in 2019. Other than that, he's fought once per year, has had a bunch of fights evaporate, and just anytime you get a guy like that, obviously he's much earlier along in his career, hasn't taken anywhere near the kind of punishment, but you wonder when that kind of guy is going to turn into a Tony Ferguson and just all the wheels fall off at the same time. Because the only complaint about Ferguson for the longest time was he was always injured, like just never fought quite often enough, which is why he strung so many wins together before, getting into the title picture. I worry about that with Allen, but all else being equal, I do slightly favor him here over Hooker. Like Hooker going back down to 145, it's not going to help his gas tank. It's not going to help his chin. And while I don't think Allen's necessarily going to splatter him, that's not, Allen isn't a lights out striker. I think he's going to, he's going to be able to land. He's going to be working against a reach advantage, but generally speaking, I think he should be able to navigate that. He's a good sound striker. I'm interested to see what it looks like if the fight goes to the ground, and I have the feeling we're going to see it because I expect this fight to go all 3 rounds. But just tentatively, give me Allen by decision. That brings us to the main event of UFC Fight Night 204, a scheduled 5 rounds of heavyweight action between perennial contender Alexander Volkov and up-and-comer Tom Aspinall. Volkov, the 33-year-old Russian, is 34-9 overall. He is 8-3 since joining the UFC as a former Bellator and M1 heavyweight champ. He most recently fought last October at UFC 267, where he took a unanimous decision over Marcin Tybura. That allowed him to turn things around after losing by unanimous decision to Ciryl Gane in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 190 last June. He'll be taking on Aspinall. The 28-year-old Manchester native is 11-2 overall. He's 4-0 since joining the UFC. All 4 have been finishes. 3 of them have been first-round finishes. Specifically, he knocked out Jake Collier in just 45 seconds in his debut back in July of 2020, then knocked out Alain Baudot in the first round in October of 2020, tapped out Andrei Arlovsky in the second round at UFC Fight Night Blades versus Lewis last February, and most recently at UFC Not London last September, he knocked out Sergei Spivak in the first round. And that was like Spivak stepped up as a late notice opponent, and I'm trying to remember who he was supposed to take on. I think it was Alexei Oleinik, but Sergei stepped up on short notice and got blasted in half a round for his trouble. The odds on this one have been moving. When I looked at this a week out from fight night, so Saturday, the Saturday before, Volkov was a slight favorite. He was minus 120. Aspinall was even money at plus 100. It is now a pick'em as of Monday night. You can find both men at plus 100. Again, I'm not going to give you any specific betting advice, except that Aspinall is the headliner and he's the hometown guy. I mean, London is not Manchester, but he's the native son. So if you like Volkov, watch for the odds to continue sliding in Aspinall's direction as money comes in on Aspinall. I feel as though Volkov is one of those guys that when it's all said and done, and this will be completely wrong if he makes some sort of interesting mid-career turnaround and ends up winning a UFC title or fighting for a UFC title, but I can see him becoming the kind of guy that ends up historically underappreciated for what he's accomplished at the highest levels of the sport and for how long. And the funny thing is, I think his Bellator and M1 titles are actually kind of overrated, and I don't want to say meaningless because that sounds insulting to the other promotions, but they kind of are. Like the Bellator heavyweight title was a big pile of nothing at the time. And Volkov winning the M1 title, I mean, he was super young, and as soon as he had to defend it, Vitaly Minakov mopped the floor with him. Like, what's really impressive is that when he came to the UFC, heralded young, kind of a raw, unfinished product, how well he's developed while at the same time being good the whole time. Like, he has no bad losses in the UFC. He's 8-3, and his UFC losses are to Derek Lewis, which, Derek Lewis is the Paul Craig of punching.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
like Volkov was literally 15 seconds away from winning the fight when Derek Lewis made his head do like The Exorcist and got a knockout with 11 seconds left. He lost to Curtis Blades by just being out wrestled and ground down, and he lost to Ciryl Gane by Ciryl Gane Snake Charmer special. That's it. And everyone else he's beaten, and in most cases he's made it look kind of easy. Killed Fabricio Verdum with a shovel rear hand uppercut, which I know is a terrible strategic idea, but damn, when it landed, did it like ice Verdum. Just the rest of the pack, if you're not a top 5 guy, he has an easy time with you. Walt Harris, Alistair Overeem, Marcin Tybura, he doesn't break much of a sweat. But because he hasn't fought for a title yet, because they call him Drago, and obviously part of it is that he's this super tall Russian with kind of the same hairdo. But part of it is that Drago had 10 words in that whole movie, and that's kind of like Volkov as well. He's not a big personality. In fact, Sherdog posted an interview with him this week where he talked a little bit about why he never does many interviews. And part of it is that he's not super comfortable with the publicity side of it, and part of it is that outlets never ask him. And I don't know if that's just because they assume he's going to be a jerk, or they assume he's going to have nothing to say, or they assume he doesn't speak English. I don't know what any of it is, but he's going to go down as an underappreciated guy, because not only has he been a perennial, gatekeeper to the top 5. Like, if you can beat Volkov, you're probably ready for a title shot. Not only that, but he's continued to develop. The guy that arrived in the UFC in 2015, 2016, he was 6'7". He was 240 pounds, 245 pounds, and he looked like a small forward for an Eastern European basketball team. And he was a good striker who was pretty good at managing distance, and his takedown defense wasn't great. And, now 2022, he pushes the 265-pound limit, and he's put on quality weight. His upper body looks about the same, but just his legs are bigger, and it's been to his benefit. He still throws decent volume. His cardio is still not a problem, but it's made him harder to take down. Curtis Blades took him down over and over again, but Curtis Blades might be the best takedown artist in heavyweight mixed martial arts history. He might be the guy. And everyone else, it's just not that easy. People shoot on him. Those heavy legs, those heavy hips. He digs the underhooks. He digs the underhooks like Crow Cop, and just kind of uses his weight of his legs, because, Crow Cop, another guy with heavy lower body compared to his upper body, just shucks people off. He's doesn't have a ton of power, but he has enough power to make the Alexander Volkov game work. He has enough power that if you keep running into his jab, you're going to stop because it hurts and it sucks and it disrupts you. His push kicks up the middle are like his second jab that's even a foot longer than his regular jab. That's probably another reason why he'll go down underappreciated, because he's not always spectacular to watch. And if it's spectacular, it's usually because he lost spectacularly. Like the Derek Lewis fight was terrible up until the knockout. Yeah. All of this is my way towards saying that I understand why Aspinall is even money here and might well be the favorite by the time this thing gets to the, to the cage. But Aspinall, if he's going to win this, he's going to have to do some things that he's never done before. This is a step up in competition from the guys he's beaten. Like, absolutely. Arlovsky and Spivak are both good fighters. Arlovsky is still never an easy out for anyone, and Spivak is a borderline top 10 guy. But Volkov is much better than either of those guys in 2022. And while Aspinall is well-rounded, one of the most impressive things about Aspinall is that he is a big, like, heavyweight. Like, he is a guy that's, 250, 255, and very athletic and has all the component skills. His best chances lie in getting this to the ground. Like, he knows how to do everything, but his entry to MMA, his dad, Andy Aspinall, is the grappling coach at Team Calvon. That's, like he is a grappler who also has, learned boxing and wrestling. If he just stays on the feet with Volkov, I mean, he's going to be quicker. He's going to have faster hands and feet, but he's going to have an uphill battle the whole time just fighting a guy in Volkov who's become one of the best fighters in history, in heavyweight history, fighting tall. Like, it used to be that, Tim Sylvia stood out just because he was 6'8" and actually used a jab and actually used kicks. But Sylvia didn't have the athleticism to always make it work. Like a guy like Randy Couture could bounce into range and hit him with an overhand, even though he was giving up tons of reach. Volkov might be the best tall heavyweight that's ever done it at this point. So, I mean, Aspinall could win a striking battle. He could even catch Volkov with something big and knock him out, but that would require him to do something that really only Derek Lewis has done. I don't know if that's Tom Aspinall. I think this is going to hinge on Aspinall being able to get Volkov down, and that's the real question, because Volkov is not as easy to take down as Blades made it look, and even Blades was tired by the end of that fight. Volkov, the game he played against Blades, yeah, you might be able to take me down. Maybe you'll get the first 5 takedowns, but none of them are coming for free. And it's at least not going to be the wrestling where one guy is doing all the work. So I think Aspinall has a little bit of an uphill battle here. Again, I understand why the odds are what they are, but my gut says that Volkov is going to just win 3 out of 5 rounds, maybe 4 out of 5 rounds, by keeping Aspinall at range, keeping the stand-up to at least a stalemate, and denying Aspinall enough takedowns that just Aspinall's not able to win rounds, not able to get himself in a position to finish the fight. And I'm really interested to see what this looks like if it goes past the second round, which I'm predicting it will, because Aspinall's gas tank is a huge question mark. He is a big heavyweight, and he's a heavyweight with good movement on the feet and who likes to wrestle and grapple, all of which burn your gas really quickly. If it gets to the end of the second round, even if Aspinall's won both of the first 2 rounds, if he's sucking wind bad at the end of the second round, it's going to go bad for him. So all the variables I can think of kind of work in Volkov's favor here. And because of that, I'm picking Volkov to win this by decision. But I would love to hear how I am wrong and crazy about that, Keith.
I'm not confident in this fight at all. There's a reason why it's a pick 'em. And that actually what intrigues me about this fight. I mean, you talked about all the skills of both fighters, and they're both top-notch guys. I mean, I picked Volkov to beat Cyril Gane, so what the hell do I know? But it also shows that when I think of the guys you mentioned, long, lengthy. You keep talking about how big Aspinall is. He's not the big one in this fight. Volkov is. I mean, he's like almost 7 feet tall. You talk about all things good. It just comes down to he's a very technically sound striker who understands what he does. He was really weird in the Cyril Gane fight, but other than that, he sticks to a game plan, accurate, keeps punches, range finding punches. You talk about his jab, everything comes off his jab. Straight right down the pipe is good. Works the body with teep kicks and stepping knees. You mentioned it as like another jab, which is true. If you get on side of him, he uses his movement to do well to get back to his range. He just touches. You mentioned he doesn't have a lot of power, but just touches. But the power shots will come when there's openings, and still you're getting punched by this guy who's almost 7 feet tall, so he's got to have power. I like you mentioned that the only person that's hurt him is Derek Lewis, and that is a pretty good feat when you look at the guys that you go down the list of the guys that he's faced. You also mentioned Curtis Blades being the only guy to take him down, and yeah, he took him out like 14 times in 5 rounds. But I like that you mentioned Curtis Blades is such a different wrestler than all the other wrestlers. I mean, Curtis Blades is the one who shoots doubles. I mean, how many wrestlers in the history of the heavyweight division actually shot doubles? I mean,
at a high level, Brock Lesnar.
I think he didn't do it, but Dan Cormier could. But Cain Velasquez, I guess, could. You're going way back. Kevin Randleman, you're going way back.
Kevin Randleman, who should have been a middleweight the whole time anyway, but yeah. He did.
And I don't know if he could take down Volkov for the lack of size. But my point is just because someone has a wrestling background, like Marcin Tybura is a good wrestler and couldn't take him down because it's much different style to the wrestling. He get you inside, on the hook, work down to a single. Like that's not how you get to take down Volkov. You gotta have this explosive style like Curtis Blades has. Now move over to Aspinall. You mentioned how big he is. He's 6'5" himself. It's not often that he's gonna be the smaller guy. He's long and lengthy. I like that he can work from both stances. He's so athletic. He's quick, light on his feet. He moves like a middleweight. He really uses movement well to avoid shots. He's a very good boxer. He's accurate. He's got huge power in his hands. He can mix in takedowns, as you mentioned. He's a very good grappler. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He submitted Andrei Arlovski, which is a pretty good feat in his own right, and then showed against Sergei Spivak some really mean ground and pound. As far as prediction goes, I mean, I was already on the fence. You got me even more on the fence because you made a lot of really good points. When you think about the guys who have beaten Volkov, you mentioned his first loss being Derek Lewis. Can Tom Aspinall do what Derek Lewis did? Can he crack him on the chin and knock him out? Yeah, I guess he could. Is that likely? Like, is it to match like a guy like Derek Lewis's power? Probably not. Then you mentioned Curtis Blades and the way Curtis Blades beat him, just out wrestling him. Could Aspinall out wrestle him? I guess he could. Is it likely? Probably not. But the only fight that you didn't really mention was the Ciryl Gane. And how did Ciryl Gane win? Kind of just was a better athlete. He was quicker than him. He kind of controlled the range, got inside, kind of landed his shot, got back out, kicked the leg, move, kind of just was a better athlete. Didn't more elusive and this and that, and just kind of controlled. Like in Volkov was never really get out of first gear. It took a really long time. Can Aspinall do that? And that's what I think he can do. I think he'd be the quicker fighter. I think he can dart in and out of range, land better shots. And I actually think he has more power than Ciryl Gane and the threat of the takedown. So you said that it takes a top 5 guy to beat Alexander Volkov, and that's the question: is Tom Aspinall a top 5 guy? I think he is. So I'm taking Aspinall. I don't think he's going to finish Volkov because that is a hell of a feat to be able to do. But I'm going to say Aspinall has a very Ciryl Gane type victory, giving me Aspinall by decision.
All right, there we go. Keith and I disagree on the co-main and main event of the same card for, I think it might be the first time ever, honestly. I'll have to look back.
Really?
But this has
I'm
been...
not confident either one.
Me either. This has been the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 204, also known as UFC London, Volkov versus Aspinall. If there is a big chunk of fights missing in the middle of this, it is because we had a recording snafu that I was not able to recover from. If that is the case, apologies, and that shouldn't happen again. We'll figure out a way to make sure it doesn't. If the preview looks like normal and you have all 13 fights, then I'll probably delete this so you won't know how close I came to pulling all my hair out. But either way, that's been the preview. Obviously, we will have the recap. So Saturday.
You want to throw our picks in the description so people actually care about that stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they all roll up the screen at the end anyway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all the picks will roll up the screen, like actually as I'm saying this. But 15 to 20 minutes after the main event, we'll be live on the Sherdog YouTube page, breaking down all these fights, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was controversial, which picks we got wrong, what's next for the winners as well as the losers. If you've been to those live chats before, you know that the YouTube chat section is open and we're interacting directly with you, taking your questions, your hot takes, asking you for your picks on things. So if you haven't joined us before, please do. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of an interactive group, kind of a little club that we've got going there, and we would love to have you join. Between now and then, obviously, please like, subscribe, make a comment on the YouTube video. We're both pretty good about getting back at those comments. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the fights, and we will talk to you on the other side.